So, here we are. We're back again, and it's not the end or even the middle of the week. It's kind of the beginning. I've got Craig and Steve, and Bill Cosby's a
And
free man.
and apparently we have my mood with us too.
Hello, Mood. Welcome to the show.
It's true.
So, Bill Cosby is a free man, and I just kind of wanted to comment on this because it seems like he might be kind of a shitty human being, but
You
he,
don't say.
yeah. But he had qualified immunity. He had a deal with the state, and the state reneged on the deal. And you know, I kind of gotta say, as shitty a person as he might be, I don't support him being in jail if they had an immunity plea with him. So, it is what it is.
It's. I think we talked about this last week, where a man is his word, his bond, and all that other shit. So having a deal and having them renege on it, ignoring the fact that we have oodles of contract law against that, it kind of, what's the point in helping?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, at best you're gonna get nothing. At worst, they're gonna throw you right the fuck in jail. So why bother? So that's the one update. Oh, and we've got another update. So in some open testimony, what was this? Sergeant at Arms Timothy Blodgett was being questioned regarding who shot Ashli Babbitt, and he let it out. And
Ah,
and man, I'm glad to hear it. So, as we all know, we just really couldn't say it was indeed the individual that left his gun out. Lieutenant Michael Leroy Byrd. Leroy, exactly the kind of fella you could think of as a known BLM supporter, not a fan of the people that were going into what could be argued as their house that day. So, I guess it's understandable that a man like that might do something untoward to, the people that he hates and wants to see dead. But, I'll have a link to the Twitter thread on that, and then there's all sorts of stuff. But, yeah, the whole thing's really terrible. But I felt that really deserves mention because, for one, it's now out there and it's public information. And for two, the man himself was asking about it over the weekend, saying, who shot Ashli Babbitt? Well, we know. And it's important that we put it out there because this man...
Who was asking?
Oh, Donald
Donald
Trump.
Trump?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, at his rally over the weekend, he was asking, so who shot Ashli Babbitt? And that's a question.
Oh, that's where it comes from. I was wondering. So I've been sitting here since you said it the first time. I was like, all right, this sounds a lot like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And there is like this
you must
secret
have seen my tweet
alliteration.
on that.
I did not. I've had a
I
blissful
directly
weekend.
went there.
I love my weekends because I can keep myself so busy I never have to open up that dumpster fire that is Twitter.
I don't even remember when I said it.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. Twitter is kind of a dumpster fire. I mean, I use it almost as an exercise in Zen. All right, so those are kind of the really big, breaking, important things. Of course, I know that you saw the oceans on fire over the weekend, Craig. I know that you had not, Steve, up until I mentioned it. So, the long and short, if anybody that's hearing this has somehow missed that, what happened is there was a leak and an explosion underwater, and basically fire was getting pumped out of a pipeline into the ocean. So I guess that's a little bit less oil since it's all getting burned up for what that's worth.
Not much of it's going to leak out compared to like the reserves we go after. It's like a small, teeny tiny fraction.
It's
right.
It's not going to be as bad as like Deep Horizon.
And Deep Horizon wasn't even that bad. Like
and here's the thing that really made it kind of an interesting case study on scientists fucking things up in terms of predictions. And by the way, as scientists, we spend most of our lives being wrong. It's just the way of the world.
Well, I mean,
But
that's
this is a
what
great.
science is kind of supposed to be about.
Exactly. So that's not a bad thing if that's the way things are. That means we're correcting ourselves constantly.
Yeah,
But
religion
one of the
being
things that was
wrong is
observed.
not good. Science being wrong is great.
So one of the things that was interesting about it was what they found was that a bunch of bacteria and other microorganisms in the deep were able to metabolize and eliminate a significant fraction of the oil that came out of Deep Horizon. And there was all this, bullshit that was going around the news, like, oh God, it's going to be the end of the Gulf. It's going to destroy the ecosystem of everything down there. And they went down there to find the oil to see how much there was, and there was like none of it in certain depths. And they found instead massive blooms of bacteria and algae and so on.
Hmm.
And it's because it became part of the food chain.
Huh.
And we know this happens elsewhere. Like, mealworms can eat styrofoam. By the way, that's a thing.
Well,
it's not a good thing. It's a thing.
We also know that it's been part of the food chain out there, right?
Right.
Like one of the things that is very, very common with the Gulf is the Gulf leaks oil. Like normally we don't have a friggin' drain pipe directly plugged into it under pressure, but the Gulf is constantly seeping oil, which is why we know to go sit there and dig there, right? That and gravitational anomalies. But
well, I mean, so there's between that and so not while it's constantly seeping oil, it's like through cracks more than it is gushing out of a head. So, just to
right.
complete the perspective you were setting up there, and the thing that they weren't expecting was for it all to be metabolized. Like, so it was known that there's extremophiles as well as some niche species that were present. It wasn't known that there was going to be that rapid of an uptake.
Right.
So they thought that it was going to basically overwhelm the natural capacity to absorb that kind of influx of nutrient. And instead, we were going to end up with black tar all over the ocean up top. And what happened instead was they found that a whole bunch of the oil just vanished.
Yep. Now, and part of that was because
that's just the way it is.
Part of that is because the oil companies, when they first responded to the spill and the shit show that they'd created, they decided to use surfactants. And what surfactants do is they take stuff so oil and water are normally immiscible, right? So normally, the oil just sits on top of the water. By using the surfactants...
let me pause you for just a quick half second. A well-known surfactant is going to be Dawn. If you've ever seen what happens when you do a drop of that into some oily water, that's exactly what we mean. So, you know,
so
when your water gets to the...
Basically, it breaks up the surface tension of water, which allows the oil to mix into it better.
They probably just use SLS, which is... Everybody uses SLS.
Yep.
So it's sodium lauryl sulfate. And it's very common. It's hair soap, basically.
I believe... Wasn't that the thing that was used to stop the giant alien virus from evolution?
I am actually. In fact, yes, taking.
You're taking my property.
Well, there's been a lot of comings and goings of UPS trucks in this neighborhood.
What about that?
A lot of packages coming to this house particular. Well, something's going on in there. Something's going on.
It's Amazon.
I'm taking the package.
It's my Amazon wish list.
I'm taking the package.
No, you're not taking my package. That's my stuff.
Excuse me.
It's
Oh my God!
Similar to the kind of fatty acids that are part of the fatty
I did not
acids.
show you. You're fine.
Oh my God!
You sprayed me with whatever that stuff is.
Like, say, bacterial cells as well as, say, encapsulating oil droplets and the like. So it's very commonly used in just chemistry in general. But it's also very useful for cleaning up things like oil spills, because then you can solubilize the material and wet it to where it needs to go, and then you can do proper filtration outside of the, say, an oil slick, which spreads out laterally very quickly. So if you can at least solubilize it with SLS and then pull it up and just filter it off by, say, density difference in a boat, that's way easier if the oil slick isn't spreading out continuously. If instead you have to wait an extra day or so for it to float back up to the top, stirring it up in that one location. It's way easier.
Yep.
You don't have to troll as far. You don't have to spend as much fuel to go around and find it. It just hangs out next to you.
It also makes it a lot easier for ocean bacteria to have access to it and uptake it. And one of the things
there's downside that it kills a lot of bacteria that are in a location until it gets dilute enough or encapsulates everything and gets stuck in cells.
Minor
that's
problem.
Why we use it to wash our hands and our hair, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a
minor It's not just to get rid of the oils, it's also to kill stuff.
Usually we have better compounds for killing most of the stuff, though, right? Like, that only does a little bit. It's not that toxic.
It does enough. It's not like toxic to things, it just shreds bacterial cell walls.
Right.
It solubilizes them.
Down. Yes. Yes, it does. Because they're just fat, and fats are not much different than oils. Fats are oils. They're just thicker, bigger oils. But, yep. I mean, that was kind of the thing that we were expecting. Now, this is the little fire under the ocean is very funny, and I really respect the tweet that was underneath there that you showed there. The men had their chance. This is what they did with it. It's time for women, progressive women, and it turns out the person who's overseeing the entire company is
Norma Rocio Nahale Garcia, Mexico's Secretary of Energy.
Yeah,
in a state-owned energy company.
Did she screw it up, or did the work crew screw it up?
I'm blaming her.
Well, I mean, it falls to the engineer that did the engineering, right? Somebody's got to take the blame.
Well, so she's oversight, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that she did the engineering.
That's fair.
I guarantee that means she didn't do shit in terms of engineering.
Right, like
she might have looked over the papers.
Craig's right. For the most part, oversight, compliance, those kinds of organizations, they only review a very small fraction of what actually is written.
Right.
And I'd be willing to bet you that it's probably not even an engineering mistake. It's probably an operations mistake. Like Deepwater Horizon, they knew that was a risk going into it. Engineering had very clearly stated numerous times that they needed to use upgraded equipment because
basically they shouted don't fuck up, and what did they do? They fucked up.
For Deepwater Horizon?
Pretty much any time there's a compliance issue, or sorry, not compliance, an operations issue, the engineers say, hey, don't do that, it'll break. And then they say, we won't do it. And or maybe we'll do it just a little bit. Oh, that didn't break. Right. Let's try it again. Whoops.
Or you run into things like the
nobody told us.
Or you run into stuff like
it clearly says
the Boeing 737 Supermax, where the engineer's God. yeah, that's retarded. You shouldn't do that.
Right.
You shouldn't make the safety features optional.
It works so well in the wind tunnel. Like, that's not air. That's a wind tunnel.
Yep.
Go fly it for a bit, and you see how it goes up and down like a fucking rubber band.
Well, the issue there was that they what was it?
It would overcompensate because it wasn't capable of maintaining stable control.
Well, I think it could. I think it could
unbounded oscillation.
I think it could maintain stable control, but it can't do it following certain aircraft at within certain timing. So one of the reasons why we don't take launch planes very, very quickly, we have a period of time, is we usually there's jet wash that comes in, and this is highly turbulent air that is of varying pressures, so you can't actually get the flow regime across the wings that you need to get.
You don't
get Supermax. The Supermax, because it was so big, needs even more time to clear the air between takeoffs in order to do it stably. Now, they did technically have a safety and electronic feature that would automatically do all the calculations needed so that the pilots didn't throw the plane into the friggin' ground. But you either needed basically, have 5 minutes to clear instead of 2, or you needed to have this safety feature on board.
Or you needed to have them fly it manually instead of with any kind of autopilot, which they weren't doing.
Right, and oh yeah, by the way, they have to know it's coming in order for them to fly it successfully. right? Like, they have to know the problem. So Boeing buried the problem. They sold the safety feature as optional, and then they didn't tell anybody that they needed more time to clear the runway for takeoff, longer time between them and other large aircraft. Because the biggest aircraft tend to go off the same runways because they tend to need similar periods for acceleration and all the other stuff, and they tend to be going in the same direction, right? And then you have when you look at most airports, they have that X pattern. They launch one way and they receive the other. So more advanced airports or larger airports will have other strips, but they're still launching the big aircraft off the same runway all the time, and that's why that one screwed up. But yeah, engineering probably told them what to do right, and they did it.
And they fucked it up.
Yep.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
I was gonna say you might be able to blame somebody in marketing, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's a government-controlled company. I don't think there's a whole lot of marketing that needs to be done.
Oh, right. Yeah, fair point.
Listen,
this wasn't private sector,
and I can blame marketing.
Yeah. Your billboard looked like shit that day. All the operators were laughing about it, and while they were doing so, they spilled coffee on the one control that would fuck up everything.
Right. No, it's always marketing's fault.
That's
or,
fair.
even if it wasn't marketing for Pemex, right? It's marketing for all of the parts that Pemex bought. That marketing department just straight up lied.
Fair. Yeah, so we can still throw this on marketing. So that's little victories, right?
Well,
small
who's
victories.
really to blame at the end of the day, right? You know who's really to blame here?
Go on.
Canada.
Oh, fair.
Blame Canada.
At the very least, Justin Trudeau. If not all of them.
Well, his left eyebrow. Or eyebrows.
I didn't say Justin Castro, did I? No? Okay.
No.
Just making sure, because, But anyway.
Why? What's he going to do? Dry up and blow away at you?
Just a water puddle.
Listen.
A fucking leaf.
Listen. Well, you know what's going to happen? Trudeau's going to get all of his face paint on. He's going
to put on his blackface and then get all angry black guy at me. Oh.
And then he's just going to stand outside and
You never know. He might try doing an Indian call just to complete the racist picture.
Well, guess
in
what?
the dumbest way possible.
This red man's not standing for it.
Although, realistically, as much as I'm not a fan of Trudeau, I actually find him more palatable than a lot of our politicians in the United States. Like, let's talk about Maxine Waters for a moment.
Well, I mean,
he's at least honestly.
Yeah, he's facially. Yeah, it's like you know what you're getting. You're getting an evil idiot with him. Whereas Maxine Waters is like, I'm totally not an evil idiot. What are you saying?
Oh my god! Even her denials sound fucking evil and awful.
Well, what was it? She was one of the ones who came out really early on and screwed up the Chauvin trial, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh right? Yeah,
and that's not outcomes. That's literally
I would lay that on her lap that she is the reason for a mistrial.
Yep.
On appeal, maybe a mistrial showing up. That wouldn't have happened. It would have been a stretch argument to make prior to a dumbass like her showing up and making it a problem.
Yep.
Basically threatening the jurors. That was really stupid.
And now we have that she's officially on record as hating July 4th. I love it.
And then there's also the guy that was on the jury that lied to the lawyers, lied to the counsels about him wearing a BLM T-shirt, etc.
Him being an activist. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you want to talk about a stacked deck. That's about as stacked as a deck can get.
Admittedly here, had 11 people moved to acquit and then he stood firm, I kind of would have gotten it. Without even him being an activist. It was kind of contentious as a trial goes.
Yep.
Oh, sure.
And they clearly had better access to more information than the public did. So
absolutely.
they've gone through, but at the same time,
well, actually, I disagree.
They had an activist
trial.
inside the room. They had an activist in the room. Well, they streamed the trial, but then they had the ability to review information while they were deliberating.
True.
So I don't know what written records.
I
don't know what written testimony was put into the record that they had access to that was not spoken at trial.
Yeah.
So they got to see better. They got to see better, clearer pictures of things. Have better video available to them because we got whatever the fuck was filtered through the camera that was sitting there at a weird angle at the screen.
And I mean that's a fair point, right? They definitely and I think the biggest thing is that they have all of the evidence and it's all going to be in a nice little pamphlet that's handed to them.
And more and better doesn't mean like amazingly more and amazingly better. It just means that they had more and better. They had the best access to information.
When it comes to sitting there and like having good information, it's about organizing it in front of you in a good way. That's actually like the bulk majority of what an engineer ends up doing is less about our computational skills or our knowledge of physics and mathematics. It's putting all of these complex ideas into a bite-sized image or infographic.
So we can convince dumbasses to pay for it.
That's exactly correct.
Grifter's gonna grift, right?
It's not
when
grift.
I say dumbass,
it's not
what I mean is our lovely sponsors for the projects.
It's not a grift.
Have no idea what the fuck a widget is.
We're just helping the customer understand what they need to buy.
Which is anything we sell.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Just everything we tell them to, including all markups.
Will this work? Not without this. Are you sure you don't need that? Are you sure you need that? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the fun part is when they ask that question. The fun part is that doorknob question. Are you sure you don't need that? And then they get a New Horizons.
Yep.
Okay, well, I guess that's fair.
Correct.
It's not marketing. When we try to sell something, usually it has a purpose.
Yeah, usually it does.
True.
It usually goes through one of two ways. Well, you can go without it, but then you have to do this, and this is much less convenient than that.
Oh, I guess I can actually think of kind of an analogy here. As opposed to the M16 that had to be designed for Vietnam use, as opposed to the M4 that rose from it after many years of grunts on the ground actually using a completely fucked piece of machinery that was ill-designed and poorly thought out for its intended purpose.
I thought the M16 was originally designed to use both our ammunition and the opposing sides, or was that the AK?
No, but the AK, and also that's not going to be the initial AK. That's going to be the AK-74, the later redesign. Yeah. It can. It's not great because the fit isn't perfect, but it can fire a 5.56. But you're going to fuck something up eventually.
That's okay. Because by the time you run out of your rounds and your enemy's rounds, you should have another gun to grab somewhere.
One would hope. I mean, especially if you're out in, the field of war, as it were.
Sigh.
Yeah, I could get into gun firma. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in that. There was somebody that was talking a whole bunch of shit about assault weapons recently, and didn't know a single goddamn thing. Might as well have been talking to a hole in the ground.
Didn't California upend their assault weapons ban? Like, didn't a judge sit there and say,
Becerra,
yeah, that's no bueno?
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, the basis of the ruling isn't necessarily great, but nonetheless, I welcome the ruling. It was based on the popularity and overwhelming acceptance of the AR-15, just the fact that there's so many out there. So that's not really the best benchmark as far as constitutionality, but it's something at least, and it gives you an end to actually attack something that is just plainly and facially anti-constitution. So it's something. Now, that said, the full Ninth Circus got together, and they're going to be doing a whole in-bank hearing on that so that they can get everybody in there and do their very damnedest to alienate the human rights of the and people under their purview. Because
you know what?
The Ninth has had a lot of new judges in it because of Trump, so it's actually it's hilarious how many good rulings have come out of there recently.
It really is. It's pretty wild.
You compare it to when he first took office, right?
Right.
Like, that was nuts those first few months. It didn't matter what he did. It didn't matter where the jurisdiction was.
The Ninth had a fucking injunction for it.
Right, every single time. And, like, I mean, they had
injunctions. And where was it all being done? Fucking California.
Yep. Like, I mean, and it was getting to the point where it was getting really blatant. Like, he couldn't pass an executive order before they'd file an injunction. And then every single time he'd win and beat out the injunction. But it didn't matter because they filed their injunction.
Yeah, they held back whatever thing for however long.
And it did. Now, it's not to say the entire Ninth was like fixed in this first couple of years. The Ninth is partly responsible for so many people being able to make it into the U.S. when he was trying to shut the fucking border down at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Like,
they got blood on their hands.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I am going to be right back. I have to go get some cake.
Yeah, not a problem.
Cake.
Uh-oh.
Cake.
Delicious.
Like, is it good cake or is it shitty cake? What kind of cake?
I mean, it's Publix cake. It's pretty damn good.
Oh, Publix cake. You know what? It's not as good as Piggly Wiggly cake.
Cry about it. I'll be right back.
I have to say I've honestly not had a Publix or Piggly Wiggly cake, having shopped at both of them. So who knows?
I have had both. There's no real difference. It's just standard grocery store cake, but
probably better than Walmart.
I do miss your grocery stores being called Piggly Wigglies. That was a much better time.
We do have one of those around here, although it's not like nearby. I've got to go.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought they were like all gone.
Nah, they're still out, but it's not like. I don't think they're a big city thing. I think there's something that's a little bit more country. Like, you've got to get kind of outside of cities areas to see them.
Really? I thought they were all gone.
No, I'm pretty sure.
Oh my god. They're technically headquartered in New Hampshire. How the hell does that happen?
Yeah, they're still around. I thought so.
Yeah.
Founded in Memphis,
it's weird.
Tennessee. Oh, wow, shit. They've got like almost 500 locations still open.
Yeah, what the hell? And it's like it's based in Keene, New Hampshire. It was funded in Memphis, Tennessee.
Huh. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they've actually got a number of locations. I don't know where all they are, but it looks like they're up and down the East Coast at least.
Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia. So their headquarters is in New Hampshire, and they don't have a single store in New Hampshire.
That's funny. Yeah, apparently they got bought out by Kroger Corporate, so...
Wow.
Or is this an archive? Wait a second. No, I don't know. Oh, who knows?
No, according to Wikipedia, which, this is
take that with a hefty grain of salt.
I trust Wikipedia on things that are not culturally relevant.
That's fair. Or
yeah.
Well, there's a couple of
not politics,
little ones there, but yeah.
Nothing else like that. It's
or celebrity.
Trust it.
But then you say, as you say, culturally relevant.
Yep. As long as it is not culturally relevant, then I trust Wikipedia. Like if I have to go sit there and go look for some bizarre, weird equation, Wikipedia is a really great one to find the equation for what I want to go do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Craig actually linked me to a great article on logarithms on there, as a matter of fact, as well. So.
Oh yeah, you can find some great stuff.
That I suppose makes sense. Like something that you kind of can't fuck up, or that Merriam-Webster won't just fold and fuck up, like the definition of racism.
It has more to do with like the number of people who are qualified to comment on the article is so few that it means that it's kind of like naturally pure. It's like spring water, right? If nobody can get to it, nobody can shit in it.
Fair.
That's kind of how I look at it. But here's the downside is in some of those rarefied articles, the same people who are the only ones who are qualified to actually write anything about it are absolutely terrible at any form of science communication, and so it ends up being awful.
And now that raises the next question: is that better or worse than a Sokol squared situation?
I
Because
would say,
mean, we really do have to consider just how white supremacist icebergs are. You know.
I don't know. I don't think I think that I would rather do that than So-Called Squared. The problem with So-Called Squared is that they went straight to journals, and journals generally are paywalled. And yes, you can get these weird things in the editing comments, but it's not very common on Wikipedia, at least not in the stuff that I look at. Then again, I haven't looked at Wikipedia I don't really research anything that is culturally relevant ever, because why would I waste my time?
Oh, that's fair. I mean, well, you've got us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we waste all kinds of time on social media.
Oh man.
Is your cake adequate, sir?
It's fucking delicious.
Great. Oh, so I had something that I think you would be just that. Sorry, not you, Craig, but that would be absolutely perfect for you to comment on. The power situation in New York over the last few days. It's been
laugh at human misery.
It's been a real show. Oh man, I think his white hot rage has destroyed his mic with just mental waves of hatred.
Oh, that or rolling black, that or rolling
brown. No, I am seeing things that are deeply upsetting. So I will probably be I'll link it in chat. It's very upsetting.
Have you been affected?
Oh, they closed it. Fucking Twitter. That's amazing. I can see it from somebody else's tweet, but so Election Wizard, right? We all tuned into him.
Familiar,
especially.
Yes.
Yeah. So the guy sat there and linked something about the entire U.S. women's national soccer team turning their backs as a World War II veteran was playing the national anthem.
Oh my God!
Yeah, that happened.
Right?
That happened today, I think.
And Twitter has deleted the entire tweet.
You don't say.
It is. I am not even joking, but they didn't delete the back file. So if
that persists for a little while.
I'm looking at Jack Posobiec. Jack Posobiec sat there and tweeted this tweet. So if you go, you can see the entire thing on Jack Posobiec's tweet, but they didn't delete the background tweet for the Election Wizard thing. So you click on his tweet, and it's no longer like it doesn't exist. It says the file doesn't exist, but it's playing right here. That's amazing.
Huh.
I love when Twitter goes and fucks up.
Oh, that's always a good time.
Yeah, it's every day.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's kind of the sad part, right? Like it's you know why they're all doing it? Because that one athlete did it. Right?
It's fucking disgusting.
Oh, you mean the one that got called out as posing with the American flag just recently? Also that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an issue if you burn the flag, right? I'm not saying that I would ever do it. I find it offensive, but I also believe that it is every American's right to do that. I have no real strong opinion if you want to protest during a sporting event, right? Now, I will say that if it was me and I was running the NFL, they would lose their jobs because my job is to put
it's against the rules that they signed.
Right.
It's against the rules they agreed to when they signed that contract.
Right. And so I can't really get into the mode with that though, right? Like you should I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't support that because I'd be pissing off at least half my audience, so they'd be gone. Right? My job is to put asses in seats and sell those seats. But when you're at the United States Olympics, right? And or when you're at the Olympics and your team is the United States team.
If you're not for the team, then fuck off.
Right.
That's my answer on that.
Like you had to try out for the Olympics. You had to consciously choose to join the United States team, and then you're going to protest the anthem? No. No. You joined up to represent the United States at the Olympics. If you're going to choose not to do that, straight up, never again, you're going to be fired.
Now, here's the thing. I could see coming in last place for the people that do qualify and being pissed about it as being somewhat representative of part of the U.S. Because, I guess you're upset you came in last, dumbass.
Right, I guess so.
But again, like, she is the person who claims to have a world record who came in third place. Like, it's just, shut the fuck up at this point, you know? Like, you just live by the example you're setting out in front. And if you're sitting there turning your back on the flag and then getting all huffy because of the timing of the fucking anthem, which can play at any time that you're on the podium, by the way, like, that's when it happens. Like, it is a personal snip that she turned into some kind of virtue signal. Get fucked. Like, that's even worse than being up there for a protest. The fact that it was incidental to your personal issues, just no. You get off the team. Get out.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's really not a need for you if you're gonna be behaving that way for an international competition in which you are representing a country. You know, why are you going to represent somebody that you openly despise?
Now, all this said, the X Games is way better than the Olympics now. I don't understand why we even pay attention to it. The IOC is also cancer.
I don't know. The Olympics I always like because it's literally the best of the best athletes competing. I mean, when you look at somebody like Simone Biles, that's absolutely amazing. And Phelps, Biles, these people are genetic mutants, right? It is an amazing thing to watch them perform.
And the funnier one is, these people are told, look, this is the time in which you will be tested for drugs, and this is how long these drugs stay in your system.
Yep.
And then you have the athletes that show up, get tested, get disqualified for having certain drugs in their system, and they're baffled as to how they could have possibly known.
Oh, I found a link to an article on the ladies doing that, by the way, from the Post Millennial, so I'll include that for everyone. And I'll drop it in the staff chat if you guys just want to have one to reference. 98-year-old World War II vet that was playing the national anthem.
You found it. Look at that. Oh, well, I guess you didn't find the tweet.
I found one from the Post Millennial.
Speaking of deleted tweets, as a nice little segue, maybe.
Oh boy.
Going? No, Evan's not gonna bite. Oh, this is sad.
I'm actually
set you up, Evan.
Sorry, I'm doing a little bit of research on this, and I'm having a bit of difficulty finding anything else. Believe it or not.
He hands you a layup, and you turn him down. It's like you're turning your back to him.
I normally trail off, and I just completely go silent, or I'll get distracted by, my dog. And this is the first time I'm actually on point and on target, and I set him up, and he just
slaps it down.
Whiff. Utterly.
Slaps it down, and Hulk shouts at you. And he lands.
That is very sad. This is very sad. Craig, I think you and I are just gonna have to run the show from now on. We'll just oust him, and we'll take control of the
crash and burn so fast though.
Yeah, we're gonna take control of the $3.
Hey, we're almost up to 6 now.
We gotta invest it wisely, sir.
Yes.
Gonna get hundreds of Doge coins.
I have a solution.
Return on investment might be negative, but it's gonna be a good negative.
Let's see. I think I got something. There's an auction site that sells land for $1 a piece. We could buy $6 worth of land.
I mean, at the way that BlackRock's buying that shit up, it could be worth millions in 2 days.
Well, they're only doubling, so.
I got it. I finally remembered.
Yeah. So what we do
Had to
is
go
we
friggin'
buy
Mind
it.
Palace on this
We
shit.
wait a couple days. We sell it for $12. We buy again. We wait a couple
Oh, it
days. We
doesn't
sell it
work
for
like
20.
that.
I know.
It doesn't work like that. If you want the dollar land, yeah, it's really worth $1. This is one of the things that always pisses me off when people sit there and whine and complain about, like, you know, how unfair the system is. There's plenty of land. It is very much available, right?
It just is not developed for you.
It is just not developed. That
requires
free.
work.
Not only is it not developed, if I'm not mistaken, most of that's going to be off-grid, too.
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
Probably pretty far off of the
there's
grid.
Actually, the $1 stuff tends to be, but there's also cheap land that you can go buy wherever you pretty much want in any state that you want.
Let's not forget the wonderful value-added tax you build into yourself. If you show up and you do something with the land, you're now responsible for paying the tax on that. And when it was worth $1, it was not that bad. But when it becomes worth $100,000, now it's not so good.
That's right.
It is.
Why? What is all
your
these?
Taxes are now suddenly more than $1.
Who the hell wants a subdiv lot in California?
Nobody.
In California?
They've got there's one up there. This one, it closes in an hour. It's up to $1,600. Right? It's just rising like crazy.
Well, I mean, it's Oh, yeah, but then again, it's California.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, wait, it's California, but it's like, oh, right. Yeah, but it's also
the Bay
California.
Area is about to collapse, and it's gonna.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna be there for it. I just, like... I know people that are in that area.
Craig,
I just hope they get out first.
When we get really rich, we should just buy a bunch of C4 and pack the fault line there. I'm just saying... Save the country a lot of trouble.
Look, what we need to do first is be like Orlando Jones in Evolution and become honorary members of the USGS Society.
Ah, yes.
And go out on official field work to blow up the fault line.
I mean, it looks. I will say
we have the backing of the U.S. government behind us as we do it.
I do understand why everybody moved to California, right? Because it's a friggin' desert. Right, and deserts are amazing. You realize when you get out to one that is the natural state of our evolution. Like, we evolved to survive in arid regions, and it really sucks to not be in an arid region. You go to an arid region and your sweat glands are working at 100%. You just feel comfortable all the time. You just run out of water a lot, but you feel comfortable.
Yeah, there's that minor fucking detail.
Minor problem. But you know, then you go back to 90 degrees and 80% humidity, and you're like, this actually sucks.
See, that's where my body gets confused, because like half of my ancestry is like desert creature from the Middle East, and I grew up in a swamp.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit of difference there.
Sudden shifts, and then the other half of my genetics is from like the bog areas of UK marshes, and then I grew up in a swamp.
Yeah, well, then you're not too far off, at least. You're halfway there. So
2,000 square foot, 4-bed, 2-bath house for $2,800.
In California?
No. Oh God, no.
I was thinking, like, anywhere?
Yeah. No, this is in Illinois.
Oh.
I'm sure it's a giant shithole.
Well, it's in Illinois.
I was gonna say that's got to be one of those collapsed buildings in the Chicago area, right?
No. I mean, I see an elliptical. Okay. There's an elliptical in it. Somebody was sitting there and exercising in that room. Oh my God, this is amazing.
So they're literally a rat in a cage. All right.
I gotta link this one. This one's good.
Oh,
this one's good. This is great. You should look at the pictures.
Oh boy.
Oh, I'm gonna put this. I am gonna put this in the show links because
dude, look at that fence.
Wow, that's boy, that's really wow.
Look at that fault line up the wall of the building.
Oh yeah. My, this is really a fixer-upper, huh?
That's just a little bit.
I see I see the elliptical you were in reference to. That does not look like the most welcoming exercise nook.
No, but somebody clearly did exercise there.
This looks like the set of a horror movie.
You step in there,
and the pictures are taken in the day, and it still looks. Oh, Peoria. Oh.
It still looks very inviting. Yeah.
Yeah, the pictures are taken in the middle of the day, and it looks like someone was murdered here.
It looks like, from looking from above, it looks like one of the places that were quickly swept over with the satellite imaging in the movie Enemy of the State. You know, Will Smith running away with Gene Hackman.
Oh yeah.
You know, they had the satellite tracking them running around, and this looks like, you know, one of the places that would have been glossed over. Just, you know, if you stare too long at these overhead pictures, you start to get an idea of how bad the neighborhood is.
This is
like, just look at the sidewalk. Look at the state of this place.
Now, I tried to buy something off this place once. It was actually like a chunk of land that's not too far away. It's in it's actually probably an area that I kind of wish I'd actually bought it at this point, especially with the inflation. I just didn't, like, I bought it, I had the money for it at the time, and then it took them a year to freaking get the paperwork to me with COVID. So I said, yeah, screw it. But I paid I would have been $800 for I think a half-acre lot or something like that. Half of it was a hill, so that would have been useless, and it had a pre-poured concrete pad on it, so it would have actually been pretty close to ready to go. But there is stuff on here that's pretty good. But yeah, I see all this $1 stuff. I can't remember why. That's what we should use our $6 for. We should go buy a whole bunch of land.
Oh, a whole swatches of it.
We offer everybody the opportunity to go carve out their.
You know, you gotta wonder what the land's valued at. Like, I love this too. It's a $1 minimum bid, but the buyer's premium is 10%.
Yep. Actually, it's got a minimum buyer's premium. Usually, it's like a couple $100.
You're not talking about paying a couple $100 for a dollar's worth of land.
Now, I'm not sure who really wants to $1 worth of land for an 1.25 acre lot in Arizona. I'm not sure I'd go for that. Arkansas.
I don't know. Arkansas, maybe. Arizona is it's a little warm and dry.
Arizona would be tough to colonize.
Now,
near the I-40.
Now, we were talking about just a second ago things kind of disappearing, and I had a hell of a time finding this one.
Yes.
I don't know if this is what you were trying to tee me up for, but I've got 3 sources. I've got the AP, I've got Fox News, and I've got Bearing Arms. So we'll start with the AP, and I imagine most of the listeners to this particular show are going to be familiar. There was something that happened in Massachusetts over the weekend, either the morning of July 4th or the evening of July 3rd, I believe, or maybe even overnight. There was a group of, I'm not sure if they were a militia or what exactly their thing is.
No, it's a religious cult.
But they call themselves the Moorish Sovereign Ideology. So
it's a bunch of
Well, hold on. Let me start with the AP article so that we can get the literally most biased point of view that we can. Now, I know that when more is said, and it doesn't mean a larger amount, that we're generally going to be talking someone that's got a Middle Eastern or African descent. So
you're talking about North Africans who invaded Spain.
Yeah. Okay. So African.
The south of Spain.
So we're gonna say that one would assume that would be a black person.
Why does everybody but me know that is like a point of fact?
Good question. There's all sorts of things that people
because that's how the Sephardi's that were my ancestors came into Europe from the south, where all the Ashkenazis went in from the north.
So with this Wakefield arms
you're
standoff
part
against
Ashkenazi?
What, you didn't know that?
I'm Ashkenazi and Sephardi. Yeah.
I did not know. Oh, that explains a lot. Ashkenazis are like top tier for IQs. I think
there are some beautiful exceptions.
I mean, aren't there always?
Yeah.
Well,
and by beautiful, I do not mean physically appealing.
Are you sure?
There are some
I never said they were lookers.
There are some that are physically appealing, but there are some that are when I say a beautiful exception to the high IQ thing, you can tell.
I just know that what is it? I think that it was always used to be when you look at like race and IQ stuff, it was always white people was 100, Hispanics were about 92, black people were around 85, and then the Asians clocked in around 105, right?
Sounds
but
about right.
Then I found out the Ashkenazi Jews come in at 115, and you're like, it's crazy.
And they don't even speak the fucking language.
Yeah.
Now, from my understanding, a lot of that, too, just as a complete by the by, there was an effort post-World War II to just basically do a knowledge kind of eugenics thing in the Ashkenazi people. Just teach everybody as much as you can, and have kids, and teach those kids as much as you can, and have kids, and teach those kids as much as you can.
Well, so the thing is, you learn as a society, or as a community rather, that the way you advance yourself is through having the knowledge required to do so ahead of, like, just you're hammered in as a child to get your education sorted. Like, it's the first thing you do. Have you gone to school yet? Okay,
Sure. No,
what's your homework, etc.
Well, where I'm coming from, this might be anecdotal too. I can't exactly back it up because I haven't seen these sources in such a long time. But from my basic understanding, pre-30s, the Ashkenazi population didn't hit that 115 mark. They actually hit about at or slightly below the generic white man average. And then through, I want to say, inside of 3 generations, they were able to raise it that much just by being very specific.
The language is the issue. It's a language barrier issue for a lot of these kind of situations.
Maybe.
So it's an insular community was kind of forced to start learning a whole bunch of other languages pretty quickly.
Right.
And it just happens that you give people tests in English after they've been learning English for a couple generations, they're going to understand it.
Well, there's more to it than that. When we start talking about the older IQ tests, right? They were not as widely distributed as they were later on, because psychometric testing wasn't like recognized as a thing until the 70s or 80s. So it's very likely that the only people pre-World War were those who ended up happening to take it by chance. Whereas as things got a little bit more towards the now, we could be dealing with 2 possibilities influencing those results. The first is either wider scale testing, though I think they kind of curbed IQ testing out quite a bit, predominantly because they didn't like the racial results they were getting.
And damnable bell curve.
Yeah. So that's one possibility. The alternative is that only certain people were tested. And this is one of the problems that you have whenever you're starting to talk about where we start implementing these kinds of tests. It's okay in a broad scale population basis. So what we have for most race IQ stuff is pretty good. But the Ashkenazis have always been kind of this introspective society. Yeah. So because of that, they may not have actually sent that many people towards schools or positions where they would have actually been sampled, and so the people who did get sampled skewed the results.
You're probably not going to get representative sampling of say a lot of the people who go into rabbinical schools.
Right.
But I'll liken it to this: the same Native American DNA tests that were given to determine the ancestry of the whitest woman in Congress. That was all based off of Peruvian, Colombian, and I can't remember all 3 of them, but basically 3 South and Central American populations.
Actually, also the indigenous Mexican population is the other one that there's like a large store of. I think we may have covered this at one point.
Yeah, we did. But the point was that none of the populations tested to determine Native American ancestry were from North America.
Yeah, funny enough, you actually can't really get a good answer on legit North American Indian ancestry without doing the genealogy because there aren't large enough genetic samples to work with.
Yeah, because they don't trust anybody to give samples. So this is where it comes back to what we were talking about with the sampling bias. Like there is no way that she could have proved without genealogy that she had Native American ancestry, and by Native American we mean the North American ancestry.
No. So, she could do that because she was told as a young child.
Yeah, high cheekbones, and and the pawpaw in the recipe book.
Well, if you can take her immediate, if you can take her dropping of that as quickly as she did to mean anything, I think we can read something into that.
I love that her cookbook was just someone else's cookbook. Her name. With like her name and fucking Native American imagery plastered all over it.
I would
expect no less from her.
I will say this: if I remember correctly, her testing came back that she was technically Native American, right?
Yeah,
but it was like
24th.
Yeah,
something like that. Now, coming from the New England area myself, right? Every single person in New England believes that they have Native American heritage. Every single person. It's like
probably
it's just
because
part
they
of the
probably do.
Very real possibility.
I that's kind of how it works, right? And every single time you go to your genealogy and you try to dig into it, everybody assumes like your grandparents and your parents will tell you of like their ancestor at one point who was. And I will say that my wife did a very thorough thing. And I am actually less Indian than Hiawatha was.
That's kind of impressive.
Really surprised me. I was really surprised because my grandmother told me that her great-grandmother was. So I was expecting 1/64 or so.
Huh. Yeah, I need to do the proper genealogy myself because I don't know exactly, and I'm not even entirely sure the tribes that I'm descended from, and it's apparently 2 or maybe even 3. So I guess it's something I should probably get locked down so that when they try and throw me in the pit for the Oppression Olympics, I can claim my proper caste.
What you should make sure you do is become card carrying. That way you can throw that in their face too.
True. Oh, speaking of carrying cards, we were actually kind of right in the middle of this thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I've got the AP article. Let me copy that. I'll drop that one here in the staff chat so that you guys can appreciate the Associated Press and their take on this Moorish incident. We'll say
Wakefield.
Yeah. So what happened is when you think of a Moor, you think of Northern African, Arab. You'd think of somebody that would be traditionally described in. Just in the common parlance of the entire West as brown or black.
You know what I think of? You know who I think of is Morgan Freeman. But that's because I like good movies.
Well, that's fair.
So to be fair, I actually we because I didn't know these Moors were. First off, there was a couple things. My wife presented this article to me, and the first thing that stuck out to me was, well, they must be black. Not because I knew anything about Moors.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to get to, actually. When I bring up this article, and I hit Control F, I hit B. Oh, there's 26 results. I hit L. Oh, no matches. Nothing. No words that start with B and L. So black is not mentioned once. They don't even talk about the black guns and black pistols they were carrying.
Yep. There is nothing there, right? Like if this was... And we know this.
Well, let me pause you for just another quick second and search for African. Oh, African. Okay. Well, let me read the short paragraph in which African appears. A number of the pioneers of the sovereign citizen movement in the 1970s were white supremacists. Period. The vast majority of Moorish sovereign citizens are African American, Pit Cabbage said. Now, did we really have to parse it that way? Did we really?
We did.
Oh, and by the way, that is the only place in the entire article that African shows up.
And is it all the way at the bottom? Is it all the way at the bottom?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if this had been anybody other than a black group of, cultists, this would have been, white supremacist militia.
Oh, you bring a great point. Let me search for white in this article about some black guys. Oh, look, twice. Okay, let's look here. Oh, the first one, I already read that to you. In the 70s were white supremacists. Let's see the second one. Many years ago by white supremacists.
Yep.
Huh.
So somehow in an article about black people, they managed to talk about white supremacy twice. I think there's
yeah.
Isn't there a feminist argument about female autonomy, wherein they two women have to have a conversation that doesn't? Yeah. This is exactly like this. Like,
yeah. This is the Whitetail test.
This is yes. Like, in order for black people to have autonomy, are they able to hold a conversation about black people without talking about white supremacy? That's what I want to know.
So let me hop over to the Fox News and just type in.
No, I do want to start with, I actually support people who I support them sitting there because these guys were going off. They were going to go do whatever crazy cultists are going to do. I don't have scissors.
And the way it all went down was super chintzy. So the guys get pulled. Yeah, I'll just break down the long and short of it if anybody is unfamiliar with the incident as it went down. So these guys are pulled over at the side of the road. Apparently one or both of their vehicles, don't know, ran out of gas. So somebody went to get some more gas and did so in a fucking tack vest with their gear and everything. Like their whole battle rattle, had their rifle, pistol, the whole shebang. So walking around like a Black Panther, and somebody calls the cops. So the cops show up to see these two blacked out SUVs with a bunch of tacked out dudes, and the first thing they think to do, run into the woods. Smart, right? You see the cops,
it wasn't actually that wasn't quite how it plays out.
If you can clarify,
the cops
please.
saw them trying to dump gasoline in the gas tank on the side of the road. So the first cop stops to say, "Hey, can I help you all out?" Then he notices all of them are in tactical gear. So then he requests identification, at which point 11 people retreated to the woods and took up armed stances against the police.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That actually makes it even stupider.
It's pretty funny. Now, I do support people's right to be armed, and I do support people's right to tell the police to go fucking, pound sand. I think that if more people...
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I think that if more people turned around and told the police to go fucking pound sand, the world would be a better place overall.
And you can do that politely, by the way. You can tell them...
You absolutely can.
I don't want to talk to you. Have a nice day, sir. It's so easy.
I do not believe that the police have the right to demand identification because they see them in tactical gear. Right? I can't get there. I don't think that they have the right to demand anything of you if you happen to be exercising your Second Amendment right, because it is a Second Amendment right. Black, brown, white, don't care. The sovereign citizens are a wacky bunch of customers, and I think that there's no other way to frame it other than they're a wacky bunch of customers. But
sure, yeah.
I still fully support their right to be armed, to be sovereign. I agree with many of their talking points. I just don't happen to think it actually works.
Talking about federal documents that don't exist.
Yes.
Basically, we can pretty much all agree right up to around taxation is theft, and that's kind of where it all kind of gets a little fuzzy.
No, I agree with taxation is theft.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, a lot of us are all the way up to that, but when you get past there, it starts getting a little fuzzy.
Right. When they start saying that
I'm going to captain my land yachts, on the high seas of the interstate as I travel as a free man on the land. That's when it gets a little complicated. And that's without getting into the fake identity that is supposed to exist of you that has however many hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can just access.
Right. So it's something along the lines of the sovereign citizens generally believe that not only is taxation theft, which I agree with, but that it doesn't count because it doesn't recognize you as a person, and if you count as a person, you can't be taxed. It's something really ridiculous along those lines, and it's pretty great. It's like listening to a schizophrenic talk about his personal plan for low taxes.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, like, the thing is, I think the way that they go about it is, like, and they're kind of right on this. A person can't be taxed, but your income sure as shit can be.
Right.
And so, and a person is not your property. A justiciable person is different than a person.
Right.
And that
Something
is also
like that.
not clarified necessarily in language. So when they go about it and they confuse the two, like without the concept of a justiciable person, you could not sue a business because a business would not be a person, and you can only sue a person in court. So
Right.
justiciable persons are corporations as well as, like, other, basically any legal entity that you want to sue is a justiciable person. Justiciable persons can also be taxed, but assets are what are taxed, not the person itself. So income is an asset. You have, like, cost of business as a way to offset that, etc. So when they talk about personhood and a person not being able to be taxed, that's true, but your assets damn well can be and will be.
Right. So they have this crazy take. Now the Moors are actually not quite what everybody thinks they are. They are quite literally a cult. They are a religious cult.
We haven't gotten into the interesting and fun backstory. There's
right.
more.
But it's not like African tribesmen or something like that. It is some dude decided that he was a sovereign citizen at some point, and they have all declared. He identified that the right to or salvation was available to black men who basically pursue Islam as a natural good or some shit like that. Crazy cult. It is entirely a black cult.
Farrakhan worshippers, then.
Pretty close to that, yeah.
By proxy.
Maybe not without his face being involved.
But it is, that is what the Moors are. So that was the clarification. They are quite literally a religious cult of black people, of Islamic black people. Ooh.
By their own admission, do not recognize the laws of the United States of America.
They are quite literally like you take your Venn diagram circle number 1, crazy religious cult, right? And you take your Venn diagram number 2, sovereign citizens, crazy sovereign citizens. They are the overlap.
Yeah, you have a circle.
Realize there was such an overlap, but there is in fact. Oh yeah, sorry. You get crazy circle number 3, which is ethno-state. Right? So they're the overlap of all 3. They're just like,
yeah. You don't even have an overlap. You
crazy.
have one perfect circle made of 3. You can't even tell where they end. They all intersect so perfectly.
They are a special. I fully support their standoff with the police. I fully support all of their nonsense. I certainly will grab popcorn and watch it unfold for them. But at the same time, it's they're crazy. They're crazy cultists.
So that being said, all 11 were arrested and are facing charges at this time. Now I'm going to flip over to the Fox News version.
What are they facing charges for?
Weapons
that's
possession,
what I want to know.
resisting arrest.
I'm sorry, but I think that of all of the laws that we need to sit there and repeal, it's resisting arrest. You shouldn't be able to arrest somebody for resisting arrest and charge them for resisting arrest. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, you can't arrest someone for resisting arrest. You've got to have some other charge in the first place. It's like an additional charge. It's one of those tacked-on things. What
did they have as their original charge?
In this case, I think probably fleeing, failure to show ID, failure to comply. I legitimately couldn't say, but I mean, there are charges there.
How can you have failure to comply as a crime? That goes right up there with resisting arrest. It would be something like.
Well, it would probably be something to the effect of failure to follow a lawfully given order.
Yeah, basically, that's exactly what failure to comply is. Basically, the police officer has a reasonable request. In this case, it was probably, let me see your ID. And
that word is important, by the way, reasonable.
Yeah, like specifically in a legal sense, reasonable, for which there is a very specific definition. Like where you've got like levels of scrutiny, for instance, involving constitutional matters. You know, you have scrutiny and you have strict scrutiny. And when it comes to strict scrutiny, you have to say, is there any way in which this thing could even possibly interpreted to be an infringement on this thing? Whereas just plain scrutiny is, could you consider it? Maybe. So it's a lot tighter, a lot more precise.
I mean, all of that's well and good, but I don't think the cop can just walk up, bark an order, and then arrest you because you didn't follow it. Like, I have a real hard time.
Oh no, they have a case. They absolutely have a case in a lot of this. And if they hadn't run,
I really struggle with if you haven't done anything, you haven't harmed anyone. A cop walked up and sat there and demanded you do something. You chose not to comply, and that makes it a crime. Right? That's not how this works.
Yeah,
right?
No,
you have to commit a crime before the cop intervenes and requires you to do things.
Now, the fact that they fled, that really hurts them. If they'd have done what a lot of these,
so, right?
You make a valid argument, but I don't know Massachusetts law, and I'm pretty sure Massachusetts is very, very unfriendly to the Second Amendment.
I don't really give a shit what Massachusetts law is.
Right? Well, you don't have to.
This isn't about what the law actually is, because I'm sure they're going to have some sort of bullshit reason they can get beyond it. But I really do struggle with a whole bunch of people who are minding their own fucking business, who turn around and basically told a cop to go pound sand, and now all of a sudden they have criminal charges against them because they told a cop to go pound sand. You absolutely should have the right to tell somebody to go fuck off.
I actually don't disagree with you.
If you are being detained for a robbery, a rape, or murder, fine, whatever. But, anything outside of that...
But if you're filling up your own fucking vehicle with gasoline...
Yeah, go fuck yourself. Like, the cops, they should have sat there and said, they should have given him a finger and said, have a nice fucking day, asshole. Like, and that should have been the way that plays out.
Yeah, the whole running
Here's
off.
The other thing is I actually generally like there are cops I know that are good people. But if they came up to me and, like, they were if there was anything where I had a police encounter with them and I didn't have to tell them something, sure shit not going to.
Right.
And if they came to the point where I could tell them, hey, have a nice day, sir, then I would go with that.
And just sitting there and demanding ID because you're wearing tactical gear, nope, not okay with that. Right? Like, I don't support the notion of pre-crime. I don't think most people are out there committing crimes. If they were doing something that was legitimately, like, threatening people, by all means, take them down, right? But if you're out there on the highway doing your religious culty thing, and the cop comes up and gives you shit, yeah, they have every right to sit there and tell them to go pound sand.
Yep, they do, as a matter of fact, have a ban on quote-unquote assault weapons. So, as much as it is bullshit, as much as it is a complete load of bullshit, they unfortunately have the right to do this. They shouldn't, because assault weapon bans are utter bullshit and shouldn't exist, but they do have the legal pretense to do this.
In short order here, hopefully, the SCOTUS will rule on the side of reason and make the concealed carry requirement kind of moot.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
It's all because of New York. It's all because of fucked up New York.
Yep. Oh, we have so much fucked up shit up here.
Oh, indeed you do. Oh, but yeah, just to finish up on this particular topic before we move on from it, what's happened here, I was going to move on to the Fox article, and having done so, just do the same searches again. So, we'll hop to the top of the Fox article, type in black, and oh, hey, men said they have reassured the police they are not sovereign citizens, black identity extremists, anti-police, or anti-government. So they are black men. Well, how do you like that? And then, I put in Africa, I get nothing. But, I mean, they've already identified the guys as black, so they don't really necessarily have to. So, lo and behold, Fox News gives us a less biased look. And just because I figure, why wouldn't they be? I'm at bearingarms.com. I do a quick search for black, and I get that same line, which they've pulled from the New York Post, interestingly enough. And then, I try a search for African, and I get nothing. So, it's very odd to see these sort of things and, the way that it's spun. But the other thing I was wanting to talk about on this is a little bit of backstory on these guys. So something they very recently did, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but one of their members just went to some lady's house and put up their sign in the front yard and basically their flag. And then one day, while she walks out to bring in her groceries, comes into the house. And
What?
Yes, yeah, walks into her home, locks the door. So she's got to call the cops. The cops come. They come back again, cut the locks off of her door, and put new locks on her door. She has to call the police again on these people. And, now they're barred from entry, like restraining orders and all that. But these people are unhinged, quite literally.
Oh, yeah, and again, right, they're the intersection of all of the crazy, right? But I still support their right to be crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're everything short of a Q boomer without being a Q boomer.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's kind of where we are.
They
so it's
walked into her home. That's amazing.
It's really, really something else. So we've covered those. Now we've actually got a whole bunch more stuff. I'd actually kind of like to get into the recent vaccine stuff that's come out. So, Craig, did you see the study about the Israel vaccine?
You got some fucking bad timing, man.
Oh?
Yeah, it's past midnight.
Ah! Oh, no, you're turning into a pumpkin.
He does turn into a pumpkin.
So, the vaccine...
Yeah, the long and short is the Israel vaccine is about 64% effective after 2 doses. It doesn't even match up with the Janssen vax.
Against what?
I'll bring up the article. I've got it listed here from the Times of
Israel. Because specifics, as you know, matter greatly for these things.
Yeah, so I'm seeing the data reporting from May is 94.3% effective. So that probably means the Delta variant.
Which means you now have to go back and find out what the effectiveness of the Janssen vaccine is against the Delta variant to know if there's an actual comparison to be made here.
And one of the weird part is I don't understand. So I did a little bit of research into the Delta variant. I'm kind of surprised that the Delta variant has any changes in efficacy for the vaccines, at least for the stuff that was coded against the spike protein. Yeah, but all it is it's 2 spike proteins linked together with a little protein that gets clipped.
So the thing is, it has multiple immune evading regions, and it's a shape thing. As you're aware,
right.
It's a lock and key thing. Basically, instead of one of the pins being shaved a little bit or whatever, they've got two different areas where that happens on the RBD. So, any of the vaccines, which are basically usually going to target RBD to help clamp the infection faster. And then your body, of course, is most effective against the RBD. All that's going to be less effective, and having two of those regions in that domain affected changes the conformation of it quite significantly. Now, I say quite significant here. It's to the significance that's required for it to no longer bind properly, which is actually not that big of a change that's needed.
No.
Oh, and I do have actually an article that'll give us some data on the efficacy of.
And this is for posterity's sake here, for people who've been paying attention a little longer and haven't caught up with what the hell these different designations mean. The Delta variant is the one that came out of India, where they had multiple immune evading variants, multiple mutations that are that resemble the immune evasion capacities of other variants.
Now,
so if you're calling like a double mutation or whatever before, which is, it's not like they combined and then doubled up the problem. It's independent evolution of these mutations, but it just so happens that multiple versions of this immune evading issue showed up inside the genome.
Now, that being said, based on at least some of the data coming out of the UK, it appears that this Delta variant, though more highly transmissible, might be significantly less deadly. So that remains to be seen.
No. It's about the same as the previous versions. That seems to be what the actual data is. So it's not like more deadly than previous versions. It's just more infectious.
Okay. So what it is, right? What we know about it right now in say California, it went from a few percent of the of infections, active infections, to over 20% of active infections within a couple weeks, or within a few weeks rather. And it's likely going to be the dominant strain in the U.S. in the not too distant future.
Right.
And that's not good for people who took any vaccine, because again, the issue is the immune evasion part of that. And it's not just the RBD that's affected; it's also the NBD. But it's the two parts that make it a quote variant of concern, thus the Delta designation, is the two RBD mutations that are present. So that'll affect anybody who's had Pfizer, Moderna, Janssen, AstraZeneca, etc. It's basically all the vaccines have been designed to go against the RBD of the vanilla virus, and this is two different mutations that made it difficult for antibodies to grab onto it. Now the antibodies, each of the contact points along the strands, it is a reversible reaction that happens. It's just that the forward reaction is more likely than the reverse, and you have many locations that can contact the spike protein, and if it doesn't lay up against the spike protein, then it doesn't make those contacting reactions that hold it in place. So that's why the shape really matters a lot. And so that's the main issue is think of it like not having enough teeth bite into the meat of it to hang on until a T cell can show up and eat it. If enough of them hang on, then they can still get there and eat it. That's why there's a kind of a region where there's still effectiveness but not as effective against the vaccine, against the virus. And then after enough mutations, enough of a difference in shape, it's just no longer capable of holding on. It just slips off right away.
So this is one of the things that comes up with immunity and immunodefense is you have actually multiple different factors that go into your immunity. One of the predominant things that we're talking about here is antigens. Antigens kind of circulate in your blood. They're proteins that bind and kind of bog down the virus and kind of wipe it out. Your killer T cells are the things that we're most interested in because they're kind of an active management and cleansing of your system. And when earlier in the whole vaccine discussion, probably back in the fall, one of the problems that I brought up with the vaccines, specifically with the mRNA vaccines, one of the downsides to targeting just the proteins is that you're predominantly just going to produce antigens against it, rather than properly training your killer T cell.
Okay, so hold on a second. I have to jump in there. So the way that the hunter T cells will recognize, so a regular generic T cell, while it has other mechanisms for recognizing pathogens, among them the ass end of one of the branches on the complement system. But basically, there's ways it can recognize things generically.
Yes.
And then it can also recognize the butt end, which is, again, generic for an antibody. So when it recognizes that, it'll pull it in and it'll just eat it. A killer T cell presents on the outside surface of it the other end of the antibody, the open Y part of it, that will latch onto the pathogens and then hold it in place. And that was what that contact action causes the T cell to endocytose the pathogen, to take it inside and eat it and kill it.
Yes.
So these killer T cells are very important, but the main thing that I'm bringing up here to make sure you kind of guide the conversation, the way that a killer T cell will recognize a pathogen is basically, basically it's kind of a quote here because it is complicated stuff. But basically, it's the same as the way an antibody recognizes a pathogen.
All of that's true, and
Again,
there's also some
basically.
interactions between antigens. But one of the problems that you have with antigens and focusing on antigen vaccines is antigen vaccines are very, very limited in terms of the spectrum that they respond to. Whereas the rest of your immune system, when you go for natural immunity, tends to do a better job overall. That's why the older style vaccines are so effective, is because they used to be a whole bunch of dead virus, so there was a whole lot of little bits that triggered all the little bits and bytes of your system to sit there and engage them.
The thing is with SARS-2, there's basically two predominant surface proteins. There's the big spike proteins, and there's the little whatever the hell it was called. It's smaller, and so the spike takes up a little over half of the surface for binding sites, and then the other one's a little under half, and then there's some other minor proteins that are present, but the majority of it is going to be spike. And of all the proteins that are present on the surface, spike is the one that had the highest binding affinity and stimulation of the immune system. So that's
all of which is true.
Just to give the thought process behind why a particular antigen out of however many there are would have been picked.
And again, there was also discussions about the limitations in choosing and focusing on the spike protein. In fact, some of the earlier discussions associated with, if you actually start listening to the podcasts and some of the broadcasts from the folks who were working on this, was they said, hey, we'll target the spike protein, and a whole bunch of people said, hey, that's a really stupid idea to only focus on the spike protein because that's really easy to evade against. And that was what I mentioned back in the fall, was that if you go for complete recognition, it's a lot easier than targeted spike protein because the virus can evolve, and it does all the time.
Well, that's the thing is, again, there's basically two major proteins on the surface. And if, say, you decided to target both of them, say that was the plan you came up with, to target both of them, because that's basically what the body will recognize is those two proteins. I mean, the rest,
many more times than just the single spike protein to produce the vaccine and verify.
So it would take. So if you parallelize that effort, like, it wouldn't be a big issue in terms of what you mix up into the dose that you give into someone. And again, with the Janssen vaccine comes under the same mesh here because it's a modified adenovirus. It has the same spike protein presented on its surface. It's not. I mean, effectively the same spike protein presented on the surface. It's not significantly different in the limitations that are present for the mRNA vaccines.
No, absolutely not. But again, it is different from full-blown natural immunity, which was
absolutely
my which is what I brought up in the fall, was that natural immunity is, and I brought up more recently, natural immunity tends to be better than vaccinated immunity, and part of the reason is that you get much more recognition with your full immune system.
There's a risk-reward scenario there, which is also important to recognize for this. You are risking any and all the bad. Yeah, if this is by the way, this is not us arguing. This is us agreeing on basic facts of basic facts here. There's a risk and reward there.
We have had this discussion that one of the things that has been absent from the conversation this entire time is the fact that an informed risk basis has not been present.
Everybody should have it.
And everybody should have it. Right? So one of the key things, one of the main reasons why I didn't go for the vaccines was I didn't have a risk basis. And different engineers do different things based on how they in my case, one of the things that Craig and I and Evan all frequently talked about was how little information was available related to risk associated with this virus. We, in fact, numerous times, all of us, dove in on the shittiness of the presentation of the data to the point where it looks like deliberate obfuscation. Right? Now, all of this came to me trying to finally get a number, and the number I gave is roughly about 1 in 15,000, up to 1 in 25,000 if you account for the unvaccinated or the folks who show the asymptomatic carriers, and with treatment with HCQ and zinc, that goes to 1 in 75,000. Those are your risk factors for a healthy 18 to 45-year-old individual. Now, whether you find that acceptable is based on your personal calculus associated with risk.
Also,
I can present our societal terms, but those, at the end of the day, it's still you.
Analysis. Yeah. So
it is.
This is the short version of that, which I'll reiterate because it's an ad nauseum thing, but it's important.
Well, it's important because nobody else has talked about this.
Statistics always mean nothing to the individual. Statistics are a population descriptor, not an individual descriptor.
Yep.
So keep that in mind whenever you hear someone talking about a statistic. So say you have say you get the Pfizer vaccine several months ago, and you were told you have a 90% chance of not getting a symptomatic infection if you get exposed. Well, what happens if you get a symptomatic infection? You are one of the lucky 10% that gets fucked by it.
Yep.
So the point here is that the statistics are going to be a population descriptor. Well, that could give you confidence in things, and unfortunately, statistical confidence is not the same as personal confidence.
Right.
But while that could give you personal confidence, it's not a guarantee of anything.
Nope.
So you should. This is where, like, I agree that in Steve's case, like, you know, I would personally wear the mask and so on, but I would also not be wearing whatever piddly mask I'm being told to by Joe Schmo at the corner yelling at people because they aren't doing what he says.
Right.
Or Joe Fauci.
Steve isn't. If Steve doesn't want to, that's also A, not my decision, and B, not my problem. You know,
that's all correct.
Which I think it should be a pretty simple way people deal with things is the things that people are doing over there that only affect them specifically.
Right.
If you're doing everything you want to do on your own time with your own body the way that you want to, like if they're doing shit that they want to do with their body, I think shit like helmet laws kind of work up until age 16, and then after that it's kind of natural selection. This is kind of the same thing here in my book, where if you're not riding a bike, you don't need a helmet,
Again, when we start talking about a disease, one of the big problems that we have is that this is all, it's all risk. It's all risk. What do we find? And when we start talking about risk, you don't just need to be presented with what your legitimate risk is, because a number tells you nothing. The question, what you need to be presented with is your risk
until you are the statistic.
Well, that's true. That's one component, right? And that's why a lot of people follow the precautionary principle. I very much oppose the precautionary principle, and a lot of that comes from the fact that...
That's because you hate Esh. You know it.
No, it actually has more to do with me being a nuclear engineer, because the precautionary principle is the principal argument that I have to argue against.
Well, the other thing is, with being a nuclear engineer, the precautionary principle is basically the entire discipline.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Basically, we shouldn't use nuclear stuff in the first place, but we're going to study it. It's like, hold on. How does that work? It's like, okay, well, if we use enough feet of lead, it kind of works.
Well,
like, why?
It has more to do with, like, if you are going to be the regular run-of-the-mill ops guy who isn't doing any engineering calculations whatsoever, and you get told that radiation is bad, which it is to a certain extent, and actually it's good to a certain extent, and then beyond that it's bad.
But we just assume it's all bad, sure.
American society assumes it's all bad, but it's not.
Right.
So
you don't want to get turned into a Godzilla, do you?
You need to know what risks you actually face. And so a significant portion of our lowest level qualifications, DOE, NRC, DOD, it doesn't matter, is a mantra about risk. And it is legitimately, if you want to go into the manuals that guide us, they have an entire discussion section that's 30 some odd pages on the risks associated with nuclear energy. And so what ends up happening is, even though I am fully aware of my risks, I am fully aware of the risks to the public, I am fully aware of the risks to the newborn child, folks who argue for the precautionary principle use risk and the uncertainty associated with risk as the principal argument for why we should not do certain things, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why my stance on gain-of-function research is what it is there's all kinds of, when we start talking about risks, those risks technically are low, but sometimes they'll manifest, and I don't think that we should ban research just because there's a risk.
So the part of the conversation that is troubling in the public spotlight here So a lot of it will come down to showing the extremes of risk, which means you can cut out all the talk about the uncertainties, etc. When it comes to like someone like CNN, and that's if they're not just outright lying. But it comes down to the point where they will cut out all the uncertainty so that you only have the absolute risk, and they'll take that to the extreme. And then, more importantly,
climate change is a perfect example of that.
More importantly, they will then leave out the other half of that conversation. It's not just risk; it's risk-benefit analysis. You have to be able to discuss both of those. And in my opinion, telling people you can't live your life, here's the PPE, here's how to use it, now go on and live your life. Like, if you can't get to that point, then you've lost all the benefit.
Well, and again, if you turn around, if you come out and you say, hey, here's the PPE, now go live your life, I think that's grand. But if you don't clarify that in order to get the benefit of the PPE, you have to do all of this other behavioral shit, right? Then you end up with situations where you see somebody who's got their mask, they're using a cloth mask, it's pulled down below their nose, right? They're sitting there using the same mask and taking it on and off every day.
This is why I have real trouble with public officials that have really fucked this up.
Right. So maybe
I'm not saying everybody has to go through, say 3 weeks of PPE training to make sure they're definitely competent. Like one that's an extreme hyperbole. It doesn't take that long. Here's a fun thing. As a grad student, you get to pick on undergrads, but you also get to use them as slave labor. And as a part of that, you have to train them in order to work in a lab. And the safety training takes like half an hour or a day, like somewhere between those two values there. And so that is not like an undergrad is not like, while they might be somewhat above, say, the general public. They're not that far away from the general public.
There's another component there, right? When you start talking about something like a lab scenario, if I have to wear PPE for 4 hours because I'm doing something dangerous, wearing PPE for 4 hours is not such a big deal. If you want me to wear PPE for 8 to 12 hours every single day, including Saturdays and Sundays, for the next year, that's where behavioral problems become a problem.
Now, don't forget to wear it when you go swimming. And between bites of food.
You know what? I really wish, by all means, all of our Democratic listeners, please follow those instructions.
Yes, do.
That's cruel. That is YouTube demonetizing behavior right there. So.
Hey, if I'd been monetized
for the death of others.
Hey, I'm not willing for the death of other people. I'm just
commenting on actual events that have occurred
to take its proper path.
I mean,
you just ruined Evan's attempt to save that.
No, it's all good.
I'm not.
I've been demonetized for ages.
I don't want anybody to die.
I know.
I do, however, accept that we are a natural species and intelligence is a key component of our existence and survival.
Or lack thereof.
So anyway, so there's risk and benefit in the analysis that needs to be discussed. And we've discussed the risks and benefits ad nauseum. But more importantly here, again, you hear us coming at this from two different perspectives on this and two different directions on things, where I would protect myself by doing certain things, where instead of like putting it on me that I have to protect everyone else. That was the dumbest way to frame that from the very beginning, and it was detrimental across the board. Never should have been done. That was 100% the wrong move, and anybody who is sane saw it and said so, even if they didn't like fully grasp like the extent of what was bad about it. It's one of those things that seems so stupid on its face that you know it's wrong.
On the other side of things, as important as it is to protect yourself, you also have to understand where the boundaries of A, what you're willing to tolerate is, and B, what your actual risks are. Because if you don't turn around and incorporate a risk-informed decision, that's how you end up an agoraphobe. Right? Yeah. Like, that's literally the consequence of the precautionary principle, is that you stay inside all day long and you avoid all risk.
It all needs to be in perspective, and I made a key point of doing that, and this will tie into your psychology background. I made a key point of doing that when I discussed risk and benefit analysis within my own group, let alone with other people outside the group as just like consulting with people. Like what you do is you go through your risk benefit analysis. You always land on the end for recency emphasis to avoid just to get past the frequency bias, which everyone's getting blasted with this shit. You always end for a recency bias on perspective. You give people something. You know, it's like talking about how many people are struck by lightning a year versus get shark attacks.
Well, you know, it's a perfect example is Shark Week, right? They spend all of they spend like 1 week in August every year trying to scare the shit out of you, when in reality there's like 3 shark attacks for all bathers throughout the entirety of the year, and usually they're doing all of the things that are incredibly stupid in a marine predator's habitat. That's the important
thing I always bring up. That's the important thing I always bring up. It's like, okay, you know, at the beginning, the flu technically was more of a danger, generally speaking, in terms of your ability to catch it. But all the unknowns that we had at the time, mind you, not now, but definitely at the time, all the unknowns that we had available to us at the time that we could add up and say these are bad risks. Like we didn't have any idea what the extent of, say, long COVID would be.
Oh yeah, if you want to talk about like me in March, I was fucking terrified of this thing.
So like, but like at the time we were able to say here's our relative risks, and here's our general benefits to doing certain things. Like staying away from people is pretty simple. Putting a mask on if you're in a crowded area is pretty simple. If you needed it, like when it started to spread more and more, it became more and more of a risk to be outside around people without having a mask on.
But at the same time, when you account for what the actual risks you're willing to adopt are versus the actual costs of that, like lockdowns versus the
lockdowns were so totally fucked when they in implementation. Completely. We went through bouts of this last year, but when I talked about it, I was very clear about the theoretical design of it, and when he came in with the practical side of things, like the reason we sounded like we were butting heads so much is we were trying to find the middle ground that connected the two to make a practical policy extant. You know, we just needed to find it somewhere, and we just couldn't.
And the problem is that you can't. You can either take an extreme approach, which is what Craig was doing, or you can take a pragmatic approach, which is what I'm doing, because at the end of the day, then neither of them overlap. And this is all part of how engineers talk about risk. We do this all the time. What's our risk? Why not just go for an upgrade? What are we going to do if we have to deal with a casualty, right? These are my discussions
this is all change of procedure stuff.
Right.
So we do change of procedure, change of design, change of equipment. Those are each their own little TLA for a meeting.
Review points. All of these
that you have to have
are all part of the normal discourse for engineers. Yeah. And when we turn around and we go out to the public society and we see somebody like Fauci coming in and not including any of this discussion, it makes us pissed off. And then because how else are you supposed to respond? Because he's not doing what he's supposed to do as a technical expert.
He's not doing his fucking job.
Right.
Yeah, so at the end of the thing that's sad is that at the end of this, engineers also do root cause analysis, which is not necessarily unique to our field. There's a lot of different fields that have to do that, and the medical field has MMRs, MMCs, or just M&Ms, morbidity and mortality conferences. So they haven't had a morbidity and mortality conference or morbidity and mortality report or review. And those are basically where they look at a death. And so when you hear about causes of death, it's not like they list a single cause on the form in the corner. They list they list everything they found. So if you got into a motorcycle accident and you had COVID at the time, they're both listed, but the form has both on it. It's not like the statistic is deaggregated at that point. So when you look at the when you look at the causes of death overall, and you add all of them up, they should come out to more than 100% because there's overlap. So having a heart attack or congestive heart failure might overlap with, say, kidney failure, which might overlap with, say, COVID, somewhere in the line there. Yeah, at some point the body shuts down, and finding out where that happened is the coroner's job.
Or in the case of some lazy ones, even we saw falling off a ladder.
Well, it's not even supposed to be that, right? Like, this is one of the reasons why the CNN COVID deaths metric was such a bad approach, because it includes absolutely everything.
The point I was getting to is the follow-up on that, the root cause analysis that they do is the M&M, where they pick which one was the primary cause. What was it actually that did it? You know, the guy on the motorcycle, it was probably the motorcycle accident, but what if, like, he coughed the lung out in his helmet and then he crashed? They have to figure that part out. Right. You know, one of them is obviously going to be more plausible than the other.
But at the same time, that was never done with the way they presented the COVID deaths, which was one of the reasons
that
why...
was all presented as if it was all COVID related. And obviously a lot of it was, and there's misreporting in both directions, and that, I would say, plus or minus 5% evened itself out. Fine.
But presenting
the numbers on screen that way was misinforming the public.
If you look at the data, it's really hard to find the comorbidity data versus COVID-only data. If you take a look at the COVID-only data, it's much less than the comorbidity data.
So and that's one of the biggest that you're talking about. The major problem you're having here is that you're talking about a population that is largely riddled with comorbidities.
Yes and no.
Yes.
I mean, I agree with you.
It is normal
exists.
To have at least. It is normal in this country.
The U.S. is basically the perfect target population.
But here's the key, right? Like, when we talk about comorbidities, one of the biggest like farces that we saw with this whole entire thing was obesity, right? And when we start talking about comorbidities,
that gets thrown at everything, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same kind of thing when a cop comes up to you and tells you that speeding causes most traffic fatalities, right? No shit, because every single person is driving above the speed limit, so speeding is always a factor in traffic.
How about this chestnut? Most car accidents happen within 2 miles of the home.
Right, stuff like that.
Or most slippages in the house happen in the bathroom and the kitchen.
Right. Stupid shit like that.
Where all the wet fucking tile is, right?
Right.
Yeah,
so
figure.
At the end of the day, when we start talking about comorbidities that actually matter, right, the numbers that I have given as a risk assessment, and I know that I've qualified this is for healthy individuals 18 to 45. I haven't done the calculation for anybody older than that.
What was that shit you were giving me before about all those little caveats I had to throw in?
I've thrown those caveats in numerous times. I said it was for healthy adult males in 18 to 45.
I'm just giving you shit here because you give me shit.
I do give you shit because, you know, usually you carve out those things. And even this time, even though this is like the third or fourth time I've presented the number, right, I'm still tossing in those things. So I'm going to make sure you are held to always throwing in all of the caveats, right?
So, by the way, this is not something I'm upset with him about. This is a good thing that he does that. And I'm actually happy that he does.
This is what we are supposed to do.
Imagine if he didn't, and I fucked up and forgot to say something, and someone took the words at face value and then went and fucked something up.
Yep.
That's on my ass.
Yep.
And so I'm happy to have someone there to back me up and challenge me on these things. It's really important.
It absolutely is.
Anyone
and it's
who's
why we
checking
repeat
this out,
like the same things all the time. By
always
the way,
check
this
the
is
show
why
links
we're always
too.
repeating it.
I'm going to always have important stuff related to what we're talking to in the show links. Because if we're wrong, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
This is what we mean by
wrong.
Scientists.
It happens so rarely. It happens so incredibly. I've got a kid at work.
Until he starts talking to me.
No, actually, you haven't really changed those statistics at all. I've got a kid at work, right? So he turns around, he's like, I've caught you being wrong before. I'm like, how much? What am I up to? In the last 2 years of working as a nuclear engineer, he's caught me being wrong a total of like 6 times. In 2 years. I make 15 executive decisions every day that I go to work. And I've been wrong 6 times in 2 years. Like, it doesn't happen often.
This is the difference between administrative roles and technical roles in a laboratory environment.
Right.
In a laboratory environment where you're running an experiment, your job is basically to be wrong.
Right.
It's just the way it is. You know, you run an experiment, wrong, right, we're using that one. Wrong, right. Okay, that was a good one.
Right. You work in a position where you actually have to make a technical decision. Fuck if I'll be wrong, right? Like, I don't want to be wrong. But at the same time, I want people to catch me being wrong. because every single time I am wrong, I can improve. And if
he's not, he can seriously fuck things up.
Right, and if I'm wrong all the time, then that means I have to do some serious self-reflection. I get to be right all the time because I'm really good. Which is why they pay me lots of money.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of how you're supposed to get forward in life. Be really good at something.
Yeah, the advice that I would give to anybody is be so good they come to your door, not the other way around.
Yep. When the operations personnel and the management comes to you to make bad problems go away, I told my boss the other day that I'm like a gun. You squeeze me and I make bad things go away. And he started laughing.
Problem solver.
Yep.
There you go.
Troubleshooter, literally.
There you
I shoot
go,
triple.
man.
Stop. All right, look, I know I'm corny on occasion, but holy shit, dude.
Come on. It's from Paranoia. No?
Right.
No takers?
By the by, don't know if you're aware, they're making a Paranoia video game.
All right, for the noise.
Are they really?
Yes.
Like... oh my god, that's
you can't
amazing.
walk out of the lines and the whole shebang.
Oh, man.
Really?
Oh, man.
Yep, security clearance by lines and colors.
Oh my god, this is gonna be amazing!
It
I
could be.
incorporate this into my D&D campaign. This is actually like... they haven't gotten to that stage yet, but they will eventually end up in a gnomish city, which is going to be run in the same way as the Paranoia campaign, and it's going to be absolutely amazing.
That's going to be something.
It's going to... I have...
The Clockwork City
designed,
computer, right?
It's something like that. Something like that. But, like, you know, they're going to be given all of the equipment that, like, terribly goes wrong. So, like, there used to be this D&D equipment that was... so everybody knows fireballs, right? And lightning bolts. Because nobody ever makes it past 5th level. So, fireballs is the mage spell. It's like a 30-foot blast radius, crap loads of damage. Well, they made an item called a necklace.
If you like.
Yeah. It's fantastic, right? So they made an item, a magic item called a necklace of fireballs. And you take each bead off and you throw it, and it would generate a fireball, and it was a magic item. So instead, the Gnomish City is going to hand them an automatic crossbow of fireballs, and when they roll a critical 1, it jams and detonates the fireball amidst all of the other beads of fireballs. It's going to be amazing! I'll be able to wipe out everybody.
Well, that'll be exciting at the very least.
Game over. But we just started.
Well, it happens.
The mushroom cloud rises above the city.
That'll be... You'll have to keep us abreast of the progress.
Oh, it'll
be... It's a brave new game.
It's pretty great. They're in a wizard's tower. And, you know, I have a dysfunctional group. So there's functional groups in role-playing games, and there's dysfunctional groups in role-playing games. And if you DM a group, you have to know which one you're dealing with. If you try to deal with a dysfunctional group and treat them like they're supposed to be functional, then you're just going to be miserable as a DM. But if you happen to revel in the chaos, then when they try to do something to screw with you, you get to screw with them back. It's a lot of fun. And so far I have demonstrated and identified that they are dysfunctional, and I've put them in a tower that they have to climb floors 1 through 6 successfully. Otherwise, they have to restart with completely new puzzles, rooms, challenges. They're never gonna fucking leave. It's gonna be amazing. They're gonna be epic level characters, and they haven't even gotten outside of their first level quest. I am so looking forward to it.
So, just because I should go here, but
we have absolutely held you.
Cover one more thing. It's fine. I do this shit to myself. I have one more thing to cover here.
Yeah.
So weather. There is a small storm showing up in Florida soon. That apparently dumped all of its energy down in Cuba.
Good. Fuck those communists.
Right.
Fair.
So, that's still on approach. It'll be a storm. It's going to impact the west coast of Florida about 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Storm center, mind you, not the bulk of the winds and wet stuff. So that'll be fun times if you're in, say, blah blah blah. Let me go ahead and move this little slider back. If you're listening to this shit Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. and you're north of like Cape Coral and Boca Raton, then there's probably still a little bit of time to head out and get something. Like if you don't want to be driving out in a bunch of wind and rain, sustained winds in Florida are gonna be it's like South Florida. So sustained winds inside on the East Coast, just north of Miami.
Oh.
So it's roughly the same latitude. It's a little bit south of Cape Coral, but it's roughly the same latitude. So if you're like trying to like keep plants, so I have a little garden. I'm gonna have to find a way to bring it into the garage or whatever. But sustained winds are gonna be on the order of like 20 miles an hour inland, or 20 to 25 miles an hour inland, and the wind gusts are gonna be around double that, so up to like 50 miles an hour. So if you have like shrubs or whatever, they're probably going to be just fine. If you have like a little outside garden that's mobile, then you might tuck it in the garage for a day. That won't harm anything if you do that.
Now
that's
let's
why
be
I'm
honest.
doing that.
The most appropriate way to handle this is to grab your American flag and go out on the nearest highway.
Cutting to the fucking chase, man. I'll post the video later.
Yeah, no worries. We gotta wait for it to hit landfall for you first, anyway.
I fucking my American flag is packed away. God damn it!
This should be like a Florida tradition. Every single time.
I plan on what I wanted to do is go out there with raining blood the same way. My hair's not quite long enough to do that kind of fun stuff, but at the same time, like good enough. I could have taken like a random stick out of the yard, plop the flag on that, and then go out there and wave it in the middle of the road.
Yeah. This is very important Florida exercises. These are things. I'm surprised that it's not like every citizen goes out there and does the.
Seriously.
Yeah, like
it should be like it is Florida full on Florida man sports. It should be the thing.
It should be. It should be like this should be like the Great Florida Challenge is convincing everyone in Florida to go out to the nearest highway with an American flag.
Well, you see, here's the thing.
I mean, it's patriotic at the very least.
It is, at the very least.
And at the same time, though, if you decide to slow anybody down, DeSantis did sign that one law, and if he had some pissed off dumbass from New York driving through, he'd be within his rights to run you over if you blocked his path and you threatened him.
Nah, you only get to do that if it's a gathering large enough to swarm onto the highway.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen that that's basically just given a pass anymore, so, I don't know.
And it's too bad, Craig. You're going to try to leave before we get to talk about the school boards announcing that they are officially endorsing critical race theory and they're actively trying to get it into schools. Meanwhile, they've just spent the last 3 to 4 months denying that they're trying to teach it.
My two-word response to them, and all matters relating to anything to do with that, is fuck off.
Hey, I'm looking forward to August.
It's gonna be it's gonna be something.
Like it's just at this point, I want to leave copies of Dr. Seuss in front of their doors to freak them out.
I just so I was talking to there's a hippie chick at work I know, and we're kind of on the same vibe. Now, she is vegan. Sure. Which took me a very long time to accept as possibly being on the same vibe because it's so aberrant and wrong. But we're one of the things she was talking about was homeschooling and how there's way better programs for homeschooling out there where people are doing things like I was complaining about education, and one of the things that really irritates me is that we do things like history, art, and English. All those humanities shit, right? I would much rather dedicate that time towards, power tools and actually being able to repair systems and work on complex equipment and stuff like that. Stuff that would actually give you, as coming out of high school, you can actually perform a functional job in society rather than just
legitimate technical education.
Kind of, yeah. Right? I believe that you should be able to walk out of high school knowing how to run a business. And knowing how to repair people's shit.
How about this? Just bring back home economics.
Yeah,
I mean, I took it.
Yeah,
It was great.
How fucking hard is that? Like, it's a great thing to teach. It's all obvious shit after the fact, but like, you know, people need to be exposed to that line of thinking.
Well, it depends on the
home
economics.
Depending on the quality of your teacher. I mean, there can be really quite a lot you're going to learn there.
If I had to pick between making math, you know, like geometry through calculus 2, or shop, you know, versions 1 through 8, I guess, each semester being a more advanced version of shop, I would rather have a requirement that people take a solid 4 years of shop where they go into more advanced topics and more advanced design, construction, and mechanical repair, because that would actually make these kids functional.
Oh yeah, God forbid we have a bunch of engineers and a bunch of people that actually know how to build things in the construction and manufacturing.
You know, geometry. Hell, with geometry, like you know, when I would teach UO lab, there'd be kids who come in and you know they didn't get a fucking thing out of the classes. They have no idea what any of these equations mean. They've never they're not going to get it. They think that they're hopeless, and they get in there and they work on the equipment, and it all clicks like instantly for some of these kids.
Right. Absolutely.
The same thing goes with doing shop class and trig.
Yep.
Like just understanding a triangle fundamentally by making them do good things, like there in front of you.
So one of the things that this chick was talking about was that homeschooling, a lot of people have moved away from traditional class.
Or more towards the classics too, right? Like a classical education, I mean.
Wow, this is.
Oh, did we lose you?
No, it's just reminding me that my microphone is on.
Oh.
It did that like 3 times in a row.
Oh, how nice!
It is.
Thank you. Thanks for being so helpful.
I am unbelievably cheap, but I will fight the urge to spend money.
Soon it will die, and you have to get something good.
I'm in the same. I like, you know, she was talking about how some guy sat there and had their kids like design and build and budget for a treehouse. I think that's a fantastic fucking way to learn. Like, that's a much better way to learn than going to history class, because who gives a shit about the Franco-Prussian War or the wars of 1812 or whatever?
How about this? Using that history class to start talking about how to design policy for the future.
All of that.
Yeah, what are the lessons from history? What is, you know, several different Roman emperors?
Oh, you mean
or
civics?
Successful tacticians in the field.
Well,
or like what about successful tacticians in the field during World War II? Any of these things, like, just look at the way policy existed back then, contextualize it so that people get used to talking about things in the temporal context, so that, you know, you don't have idiots like the 1619 Project thought leaders coming in telling you that the United States was abiding by
project. Apparently, all of the teachers' unions are now endorsing.
Right, because they're all fucking idiots.
But I mean,
the idea is to get people to look at things in the context. To get people to look at things in the context of the time they happen, instead of by the lens of today.
Right.
To get used to putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
I think that if I would much rather have kids go out and learn farming, learn how to build shit, learn how to repair shit, than spend all of that time in a textbook. I'm not saying that there isn't value in textbooks.
Right.
But what ends up happening in college is you spend your first 2 years relearning and compressing everything that happened in high school. And either we should be sitting there.
Test out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was probably much more common at your time than it was with mine. There was only a handful of AP classes that we could test out of. And I tried so hard. I think I was in every single AP class that was offered in my high school.
I'm still mad that I took the stupid advice of the advice. Like, here's the thing: if they didn't realize exactly what kind of person they were dealing with in the first place, but like just telling me I should if I can't get out of all of physics 2, I should just take physics 1 for the hell of it. It's like, you guys are wasting my time, aren't you? Yeah, you're doing it. Fuck it, I'll do it anyway.
Yep. I redid.
So stupid.
I took physics 1, but I did not AP out of physics 2. I can't remember whether it was like they didn't offer the AP in physics 2, which is I think what it was. I think we only had because you had to take.
I remember really crossing my fingers hard and hoping that I would be able to get out of an elective with the AP art, but I got a 3 on the exam, so that sucked.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, it was 3D sculpture. So, like, you have to understand that the funny thing was we got this straight from our teacher, like, because he had done the judging before and so on. Like, these are people they do 2 days of it, and you get a couple different people to come by and review, and like, they show up there, they're all kind of they're all kind of groggy from the night before when they show up and look at your shit, and they've just gone through and looked at like 3 or 4 other things, or you're first up, which is even worse. Like, because then you get the guy who hasn't had coffee yet, and they just kind of look through it, and it's so subjective. They just kind of mark what they feel. Like, if your little paragraph, which is all you have to give for the verbal part of it, matches up with the slides that represent your 3D figure. So I did ceramics. So I basically had to take photos with the digital camera that somehow represented my 3-dimensional piece of art. So they got to look at 2 slides per piece in the series, and they got a paragraph to link all that together. So basically, I had to take what I'm not supposed to be able to express in written form or in 2-dimensional form, make that happen, physical reality, and then express that in 2-dimensional form and written form. And so I just
smart.
Like, I should have made the entire piece about the absurdity of that by itself, but I didn't. I did entropy instead.
Missed opportunities. Not bad, though. A good choice.
It would have been a great satire, just to, like, basically give them a bunch of middle fingers.
Oh, yeah, no. I really appreciate a meta commentary like that anyway. That's always fun.
But I just found it to be so flabbergastingly stupid, the way that it was described to me like that.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the problem with your traditional education systems, is it's all... Yeah, I would much rather have kids go out and build things, and do things, and accomplish something, because then they're going to know what's going to work, what's going to not work, and how to actually do it.
You're talking about a textbook. The well-rounded way to get things to and I mentioned talking about, like, designing policy and then having, like, different characters throughout history. The way to do that is to not give them a textbook and go through each chapter and describe the person from history. Instead, what you do is go through different subject matters that tie into many of those different characters throughout history, and then use them to contextualize what you're discussing, so that they get the broader view of what's going on. Because if you go through a history class sequence, you get, like, this millennia's long view of the world that is not happening in sequence. A lot of the stuff that you have to talk about in history classes happens in parallel.
Well, a lot of your history classes come out basically like a like Pulp Fiction or something. You're hopping around in history to kind of get an understanding of things, and you don't really get an adequate context of it until you get into, like, your college level classes.
And it's so crazy, like when you start telling people stuff that was happening at the same time from their different history classes, and it just when that hits them, like, oh my god, I didn't realize, this was happening when this was happening, like, or within like 20 or 30 years of each other.
Well, I mean, I think a great thing is when you look at these grievance studies, folks, right? All of the grievance studies have no concept of technology that has, they argue that it's oppression, right? That oppression is going on, that oppression is causing everything, and that suddenly the progressives liberated everybody. No, the progressives, we achieved a state of technology that made the previous form of existence untenable. Right? Like, we invented things like the clothes washer, the dishwasher, all of these other solvents.
We made it possible to make that half the family didn't have to stay in the home, making the family possible.
Exactly. We technologically evolved to the point. It's not that we all decided collectively that women should be voting and all of this was fantastic just because. It was that literally technology evolved to the point where we didn't have to have somebody staying at home all the time, which is good. But that's part of it.
Sure.
You run into the same thing with this.
The thing is also, you have that freedom, and then you see what you do with it.
Right. Well,
and a lot of what's happened is that people have decided, well, both of us can work and we can achieve more resources. And the problem was everyone did that. Yep. And when everyone did that, that meant it had to happen in order to have the same amount of resources as the average. Otherwise, you ended up being poor.
Well, that and the fact that that as soon as you double the workforce and the labor force, the actual price of that labor goes down by half. Right? That's basic economics.
here's the other part of that is if you look at the way child labor laws are set up, it's because there's an economic incentive, which is really disturbing, but it's just the way it is, to send your kid to a factory rather than have them go and get an education to become the person who makes the factory.
Yep, absolutely.
And if you don't take that long view and then struggle for it, you're never going to get to the point where you can achieve it. Which is why they said, okay, nobody under this age can work. Period.
And you take a look
at a lot of people.
It absolutely did. You take a look at something like slavery. We hear all the time about, the 1619 Project.
Yeah.
To talk about it as if it's racism. It really wasn't. It was technology. That was the only human labor. We never got rid of slavery. We just changed it to machines. And the only time that we changed it to machines was when machines were available to do it.
You motherfucker, you did the same shit with something else last week, or with nuclear testing. It's like, okay, we moved that to computers. You know what we stopped doing? We stopped dropping the big bombs in open air on islands and disappearing them.
I mean, it's
true.
And
same way here, instead of requiring humans to do physical labor for no pay or else they get whipped, we moved on to machines that we can kick with impunity.
Right, absolutely.
Well, a perfect example of this is Eli Whitney's cotton gin. That changed everything. Right. And it
changed a hell of a lot.
Well, you start talking about the Civil War, right? One of the things that people don't acknowledge about the Civil War was actually, so I had a couple of teachers that went through the whole entire basis. It had very little to do with slavery. It had a lot to do with states' rights, which was actually what was going on at the time. And the reason for that was the North has a lot of very fast-flowing rivers, which allows them to sit there and harvest the energy and put it towards machinery. The South didn't have that. So the only thing that they can use is basically human labor. And the only way that they can get all that human labor, because nobody actually wants to go out there and do it, and there wasn't as much profit, especially when all of these machines were doing all the value-added processing to all of the materials you had, was essentially slaves. And so that's why we had this huge division between the North and the South. It actually had more to do with geography and economics than it did with anything else. And the North started using its wealth and its power to buy influence, as they're wont to do. And that caused a whole cascading series of problems.
Gentlemen,
Understood.
time is upon me.
Understood.
It is basically 1 a.m., so I will bid the adieu and see you guys next time.
Have a good day. I should probably be ducking out as well.
Understood.
I guess
I've only got
a
couple of last little bits we'll go over anyway, but
all right.
To sign off our friend there, that was Craig, Craig Bob 99 on just about everything. Look him up.
He prefers to be called Craigles.
You can give it a shot. You never know.
Everybody should just hit up Craig Bob 99 on Twitter and say, "Hey, Craigles, what's up?" Just all 8, 10 of you people out there listening, hit up Craigles.
Right. So let's see here. I've got a couple things we could. Real quick, if anyone hasn't heard about it, we discussed this for just a quick second before we got on the air. Facebook is now doing your wrong think perusal for you. So if you've got any friends who might be having extremist thoughts, Facebook will be happy to, how shall we say? They'll be happy to go ahead and get you some support for those people. Maybe they'll call their big brother to help you out with the situation, right?
What I love is that the left has not evolved in the last 20 years in the arguments for why people disagree with them, right? They haven't moved to, hey, maybe there's a legitimate reason to criticize the left. They can't go there. They always go to there is some sort of indoctrination working at the back end to undo the progressive.
Well, it's internalized white supremacy, don't you know?
Well, I mean, but that's the point, though. Like, it's the same shit that I was taught in high school, which, why does everybody disagree with the liberals? Well, the reason they disagree with the liberals is because they're not educated enough, Steve. And you're like, then you get out there and you realize, hey, yeah, no, there's a whole lot of crazy shit, and you don't want to deal with that. But that's all this is this, it's not possible that people disagree with critical race theory and Black Lives Matter because they're not particularly big fans of Marxism. No, it has to be that they're racist.
Oh, of course.
And that they're racial extremists, and that they were exposed to racial extremist materials.
Yeah. It can't be that a black man has agency. God for fucking bid.
Right.
No. That's well, it falls back to the old thing of, well, what are our farm animals doing owning guns? They can't have those. That's not, you can't have that. You look at Joe Biden. What was it? Black kids as good as poor kids, excuse me, are as good as white kids. And we all know what kind of neighborhoods poor kids live in, shall we say.
White neighborhoods.
Yeah, totally they do, yeah. In West Virginia, or a couple of the other states. Yeah. Funny that. But I had some kind of decently... Oh, yeah. The good information is from that fair organization I told you about before. So, Evanston School District has been sued over critical race theory. And so it's finally going to see court. And I'll have a link to that absolutely for everybody to follow up. But this fair organization is the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, which I love it. I love it. The left used to, just like you were saying, man, the left used to really own that, the naming and the alliteration and all that, and they've just kind of lost it anymore.
Well, I don't think that they've lost it. They've lost objective reality, and so they're running into... They still have their apparatus that lets them generate very, very good propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't happen to have the facts backing them up. And this is like everybody wants to sit there and say, oh, yeah, it's always been, wrong side of history or progressivism or whatever. Well, those marches towards an inevitably progressive future, so to speak, have always been at the behest of objectivism. This is the first time they've chosen to go with subjectivism as their principal metric of engaging in this. And when we start talking about this critical race theory stuff, it's really funny because for the last, 3 months, they've been arguing that critical race theory is not being taught in schools, and now we actually have organizations that used to be liberal organizations coming out against critical race theory, and we now have the teachers union endorsing and openly advocating that they want to sit there and attempt to promote this, or things like the 1619 Project, which was robustly debunked by historians as any form of legitimate criticism.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, here we are. It's finally being confronted en masse. It should have happened sooner, but at least it's happening. And now it's out there, and people are aware that it's a thing. So, as with any problem, I mean, you can't really address it until you realize there's a problem. Excuse me.
Well, their argument has always been that we just haven't talked about these things, and that's not true.
Oh, and then, of course, there's the disingenuous argument of, oh, no, we're just trying to talk about race and this and that. It's like, no, you're not trying to have a conversation about race. You're having... Well,
there's also the aspect of...
That's absolutely disingenuous.
There's also the aspect of, like I remember seeing a TikTok. My wife showed up this TikTok of a critical race theorist, right? And they come out, and some woman sits there and goes on a rant about Quaker oats. And this critical race theorist comes in and says, oh, no, the Quakers were blah, 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 and this is the truth. Well, those were all things that I was taught.
Right.
Sorry, my wife showed up and was meandering by because she had to, go to the bathroom 10 times while I'm on a conversation with the boys.
It happens.
It is stunning. In any case, so the critical race theorist comes in and says, oh, yeah, you'd know this if critical race theory was taught in your schools. And we were talking before the show. There was a rather extensive education about slavery in my time, growing up K through 12. And
yeah, I mean,
more so in college, to the point where
even when we were
I got
coming
into
up,
an honors class, I legitimately turned to the professor and said, yeah, no, I didn't read the book because I'm sick and tired of talking about slavery. Like, it's... Yeah, I mean, it's a dead horse.
For all of our lives,
routinely.
The Civil War was because of slavery, so we knew everything about it. I mean, only now are some of these other more nuanced positions really coming into any sort of public knowledge.
It was only ever like slavery was the cause of the Civil War. Slavery was a terrible system. It's only been recently, and this isn't critical race theory stuff, but I want to say recent.
I mean,
It was
honestly,
only
it's
my
kind of the
later
opposite of critical race
education.
theory.
Right. It was only my later education that started to talk about the more nuanced aspects, right? One teacher decided that who was my history teacher in middle school, believed very firmly that it was his principal job to educate students. So he would give like twice as much work as anybody else because he wanted to convey his stuff along with the other stuff, which would be things like the economics associated with slave states versus non-slave states at the time of the Civil War. You get into your later collegiate courses where you start talking about things like, hey, yeah, it turns out the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free any slaves, which it really didn't. Because the North, when they went to war with the South, actually had a few slave states backing it, which is weird if it was a war against slavery, because it wasn't a war against slavery. So the Emancipation Proclamation only targeted states that were in the Confederacy, which means that, and because the Confederacy had already quote-unquote seceded, none of them recognized the North or Lincoln's authority. As such, the Emancipation Proclamation never technically freed any slaves. It just declared slaves free in states that it didn't have jurisdiction over.
Isn't that funny?
It is actually kind of funny, because you can look. I think it was. I think Virginia was still part of the Union. I think it's like Virginia was one that owned slaves, and they were still part of the Union, and like Maryland and like one or two others.
Virginia was not part of the Union.
Or I can't remember who it was then. I'm terrible in terms of what it is, but if you take a look at slave states at the time and the number of states that were seceded, there were actually 2 or 3 states that had slavery that were not included because Lincoln needed their support for the war.
Oh, sure.
In much the same way that Jefferson required slave states and slavery as an institution, despite the fact that he personally opposed it, even though he actually owned slaves.
Yeah, actually, let's real quickly touch on that, because a lot of people aren't aware. In the initial founding, there was a proposition to write those founding documents to include a fierce rebuke of slavery, and to basically make it a thing that cannot happen in America. But because of these slave states and let's be honest, the necessity of that labor, when we won't bother getting into the minutia of that, but suffice it to say, somebody had to do the work. Now, could it have been done differently? Yes, but we don't have the time for that conversation right now.
Well, no, I mean, the short version of it is Thomas Jefferson originally wanted to pen a rebuke against slavery. Now, Thomas Jefferson famously owned slaves, but he disagreed with it the entire time. So Thomas Jefferson, upon his deathbed, freed all his slaves as part of the thing. He also was notable for having had sex and produced children as with his slaves. So there's a whole aside and sundry affair associated with Jefferson. But in some of Jefferson's original documents, he was going to go after slavery as an institution and ban it from the original United States. However, that was rejected, as there were 3 or 4 different slave states, again, it was much smaller at the time, that were kind of needed in order to gain support against the British Empire. And so there's some folks who say, hey, if we hadn't actually rebelled against Britain, we would never have, or we would have ended slavery sooner. And there's other people who say, well, the only reason that Britain ended slavery when they did was because of our rebellion, because the slave states joined up against Britain. Britain would not have been able to actually sit there and induce a ban on slavery if we actually had slave states, because they would have not been able to risk the potential war at the time. So our rebellion eventually freed slaves around the world. But this was all actually built into the original Declaration of Independence, and then they took it out because they needed support. In much the same way that the Emancipation Proclamation specifically excluded certain states that were slave states at the time because it needed them for support in the war against the South. which again goes to the point that the actual war, the Revolutionary War, wasn't about slavery. There's a bunch of different reasons why you can dive into that, like why would poor Southerners be fighting if only plantation owners owned slaves? Why would they be fighting for the institution of slavery? And the short version was, it actually was a lot more complex, economically, technologically, and socially than we tend to teach in our current version of schools, and even way more technologically, socially, and economically complex than what critical race theory wants to boil it down to.
Or, to honestly boil this down, there were no weapons of mass destruction in the South.
That's largely true.
You know, I mean, if we want to dumb this all the way down to the bottom, you know, and fool me can't get fooled again, then yeah.
And there were some.
There were no weapons of mass destruction.
That didn't have slavery too, if I remember correctly.
Indeed. It's tremendously more complicated and actually worth your time to investigate.
It really is. At some point, I actually have a first edition book. It is in a plastic bag, but it is written in 65, and with all the original ink blots and everything else. I got it from my grandparents. You can tell because the ink still smears. It never dries.
Oh,
in really old first edition book. Oh, sorry. I have a first edition book on the Civil War.
Yeah, you had said the year, like 1800s. That's impressive.
I'll pull it out. I got it. Sorry.
No need to pull it out of the plastic, mind you. You can still leave it in there.
Oh, no, I got it. I got it right here. It's ancient. Oh, it's beautiful. This is, let's see here. It's just got a horse and a rider. Entered according to Act of Congress in the year 1863. So it was originally written by L. Stebbins in 1863. I have the original ink blots and everything else. It's a first edition.
That's pretty dope,
It's amazing. Oh, yeah. It's the most valuable book that I have. And at some point, I think I might do a YouTube reading, because it's supposed to actually elucidate and talk about the Civil War from the perspective of somebody who actually experienced it, rather than going back and doing what selected documents fit their hypothesis. Oh,
the closer you can get to an event, the better your reporting is going to be. Or, well, the better your reporting potentially is. If you get it from the quote-unquote winning side, it's not going to be. But if you can get it from researchers shortly thereafter, you can get some really good data.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's what you've got.
It's supposed to be a book that goes into the complexities associated with the Civil War. Now, obviously, everything has bias, but I was thinking about maybe reading it out loud on a YouTube.
Well, if you're interested, I'll be more than happy to host it for you as well.
I might. I mean, it would just be literally reading it chapter by chapter. I think that there's not a lot of first edition books based on historical events that we get to read.
Oh, no, not at all.
Almost everything is going to have a much more recent citation than something in the 1860s.
Sure.
So something written middle of the Civil War, even if it's biased to the North or the South, I have no idea what it is. I think it would be a fun exploration.
Well, actually, too, not only that, I mean, just based on the time you've got it there, you've actually got it at a period in which any reporting is going to be more honest than after the fact.
Absolutely.
Just by nature of what's required.
Yep, but that is one of my projects in terms of shows that I may try to host over the winter.
Pretty dope,
because I think it would be very, very interesting.
Well, I can tell any listener here that it will, if not hosted on one of my platforms, I will absolutely be linking to it.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's actually a pretty good cutoff point. You know, we've got a little bit of good news and an interesting discussion that we can move forward with. Remember the name Ashli Babbitt, and remember that it was a Black Lives Matter activist that struck her down.
And that's Ashli Babbitt.
Indeed. Who indeed. So remember that. Remember to keep your powder dry. Remember to stay sane. And if you see something that glows in the dark, well, it's glowing in the dark. So stay away. That's bad. They're trying to They're always looking for a frame-up job, so don't let yourself be a patsy. I imagine the listening parties to this are probably the kind of folks that our biggest brother would love to be patsies. So don't let yourself get caught up. Be safe out there, and of course, give me a follow. I'm Evan. I'm at that fake guy Dan everywhere. He is Steve, and he's at Ratman720, but kind of don't bother. But if you get a hold of any of the rest of us through any of these media,
if you hit me up on Twitter, I might catch it.
You may.
I'll put it that way.
I tell you what, if you hit us up, if you hit me up, I'm going to make sure that any questions or anything get through. So that being said, if you've got any questions, if you've got any corrections for us, I'd love to hear some corrections. That's always fun. If you've got any show ideas, let us know. If you've got any guest ideas, I'm always down. And with that, and all the prior warnings and caveats, well, everybody be safe out there. We'll see you again real soon.